I do. Steve on here. Funny thing is y'all are gonna see this video on YouTube release this episode. It's funny to me. Oh yeah, going for the interviewing wife beater look. Good.
All right, good. You're recording, so I don't have to.
Yeah. I'll just send it to you when we're done. I am probably gonna throw this up on YouTube as well. Because we got a lot of, not a lot, but a pretty nice selection of people watching the Bobby Liebling interview. So I figured I'll throw those up there.
Mm-hmm.
Easy to do. I'm probably, I know I sent him an email invite, but I'm probably just gonna invite him on Twitter. So. It says you've been playing Elden Ring for 15 hours. Is that actually true, or did you just leave it on?
For how long?
15 hours on Discord. I
Right
was like,
now?
holy shit! If you actually,
I haven't played Elden Ring in a couple days.
well, you beat the Elden Beast. Now you're done.
Yeah. I don't know why I would say that.
Unless I'm just hallucinating.
Oh, it says it's running on Steam. Why? That explain why my shit's been acting fucked up. Game security violation detected. Thank you, Elden Ring. Well, it's not running anymore.
Who's that Pokemon? It's Pat. Hey.
That shit is so funny.
I didn't want to intentionally ask Carl to do that, but I knew if I put that out there, he would absolutely do it.
Yeah. Big Ribbon Kendall had this hilarious fucking movie idea about railroad workers like in the Old West, and it's like it's almost like a like a West Side Story type thing, but everyone's Irish or Chinese. And so
I have to edit this video.
And an Irish child is accidentally stamped Chinese at birth. and it's Pauly Shore. And so he kind of like goes between both the worlds, and the crux of it is that it's called It Takes Two, but his Chinese name is TU too.
Oh, God.
And the poster is like Pauly Shore like with like chopsticks, except the chopsticks are like railroad ties.
Oh God, why do we have to lose Gilbert Gottfried? We could have lost Pauly Shore instead.
Pauly
Pauly Shore.
Farley Shore.
Really think David Tell's got to be next. That dude's sobered up. He can't live that much longer.
Oh,
No
see,
way.
that'd be sad. See, the saddest thing about that picture that we were looking at earlier, that was Norm, Saget, Gottfried, and Ross, is that Ross is the one that's still alive.
Yeah, which is kind of weird too.
That's the sad part.
I don't know. Did you watch that Jeffrey Ross and David Tell?
The bumping mics? Yeah, Jeffrey
Bumpin'
Ross
Mics.
is fine.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's fine. I don't like his whole like shtick, but I think he's like fine. He is good at doing like that impromptu roast crowd work kind of stuff.
Yeah, the crowd work thing is fucking wild to me. That's fucking hard to do.
Yeah.
Unless I'm bartending, which comes out completely naturally if somebody steps into the bar and I insult them.
Fucking Don Rickles over here.
Waka waka. All right, we're just waiting on him now. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to do an I'm assuming all of this is going in, so it's fine. Do we want to do an intro?
Yeah, because the actual one we put up on the podcast, I want you to just do whatever, but I want to have the intro for that. Everybody that's going to watch this video is just going to be like, holy fuck.
This I'm not doing anything for the podcast. You kidding me? I'm not editing shit. It's going to be this. I'm serious. I'm not gonna do anything for it. It's almost impossible to do anything with these anyway when we get to do it like this, to be honest. Because I can't really clean up the audio too well, and all the levels are really kind of where they need to be anyway. You might just want to boost it, the whole thing 3 decibels before you send it out. That's really it. So yeah, do you like your Crusader Kings guy?
He has the squinty eyes and everything. It's fucking awesome.
Screwat.
I can't believe I wasn't murdered. That's pretty fucking good.
I know.
Died at the ripe old age of 67 with heirs. Like, that's fucking awesome. That's like all you can hope for, Crusader Kings, is to not die of dysentery.
It's really all you personally can hope for too. So
well, it's true. Yeah,
really a good outcome, even just like for your real life lineage.
Yeah, I was like, well, fuck, I don't want to put Scotland because I'll be right across from all of the fucking boys that are Irish. I was like, I don't want to do that. And Italy already had what's their tits down there, so I was like, I better start Croatia. I didn't realize fucking
Joe
was also gonna be there. I was like, damn, I hope I don't kill Joe.
Well, you got
Joe doesn't kill me.
Luckily, Joe has all the nicest traits in the world, and he was in Croatia and you were in Dalmatia like you asked. So
yeah,
you guys got to live peacefully. I could have put you in Scotland. It would have made it more interesting, actually.
Yeah, the whole freaking British Isles would be a bloodbath. That's where I would have gotten murdered.
Oh, for sure. James didn't even last like fucking 8 years before he was like had his dick cut off and he was living in Ghent while possessed.
Who ended up being blind and
yeah, that was James.
Was that James?
Yeah, it was James. Yeah,
blind in a brothel.
Yeah, he got that rakish trait for like going to brothels. He got that after he had already been a eunuch for like 10 years. So that's kind of depressing.
Imagine being a eunuch and it's going, to brothels more.
Yeah. Immersion therapy, I guess, to get over the trauma. A pussy immersion.
I've seen Game of Thrones. I've seen Grey Worm. It's possible.
I hated that whole shit. Not that I think that he like doesn't deserve to have sex, but it's just like they made a whole thing. It's like not all of my dick is gone. It's like, okay, thank you. It's like only a little bit. Like,
I have no head, feel no pleasure, still penetrate. Okay, we gotta hope Peter joins us sooner or later. This is like,
it's cool.
It's like after hours.
Let him vibe, dude. I'm cool with letting him vibe.
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna go for a walk, have a cigar after this. I'm still sitting on a bunch of cigars.
Nice.
And then I think I am gonna watch and just push myself through that Jimmy Savile documentary.
Oof.
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to explain to Jenna who he was, and I got about 4 sentences into explaining it, and she was just like, "No, I'm good. We're not watching that." Such a good guy. Such a cool guy. Oh man, it's the hair. Like looking at it right now, it's the bangs of the bob cut. Oh my god, he was knighted too. I forgot about
Oh yeah, the whole thing.
that. God, that's what Prince
I
Andrew.
wish I got to watch. I didn't get to watch Fist of the North Star last night. It's been a while.
I watched Hell on Earth and I watched Bloodlines last night. So I'm sure Bloodlines will come up at some point. So a movie I begrudgingly really do enjoy, even though it is not a good movie.
I really just have a hard time with all these movies.
I know you do.
just don't do that much for me. This is probably, as far as like the sequels go, the close. Hell on Earth is definitely the closest to an actual movie.
Oh yeah, it's actually thought out. This is the last movie I'm subjected you to besides Microwave Massacre before the Northman. After you suggested Morbius, this is really just evening the playing field after everything.
Hey guys.
Hey,
Hello.
what's going on?
Hi. So, somebody's leaving me a voicemail on the old landline. Literally. Let's tune in. Let's listen to what Glenn Hirschberg has to say. No, fuck you. I'm on the air.
Oh,
You know, I
yeah.
usually, well, not usually, up to about 2 years ago, I would walk the phone out, but nobody calls the landline anymore.
Yes.
So
I finally got my my future mother-in-law off of a landline, and she's not dealing with it really well. I finally just told her like you don't need to pay for it, and she still tries to answer a phone that's not even ringing, which is a whole list of other possible dementia things that are happening. But
she's got one over on me there. Although, but I am old, so I do. I don't know where the generation split is, but obviously I love my iPhone. I love the texting, I love the internet, all that stuff. But I don't feel like I'm having a phone conversation unless I've got something that's got some fucking heft in my hand. It's weird. But I think that's true for, I'm guessing anybody over like 53 still feels, yeah, a phone call you do on a phone, not on a cell phone.
I'm an old soul, so I'm purely just aluminum cans. That's the only way.
To your friend's house across the lot.
Exactly. It's I mean, we're in different states now, so it's expensive, but I mean it works.
Long, you got to get good wire.
Yeah.
Hey, can I, because I don't want to make it feedback at your end, but I just want to turn you guys up a bit. If I do that, are you getting any feedback, Loop?
No, we're good.
yeah, I'm not hearing anything else. We're good.
Okay, great.
So the video of this I'm going to put up on the YouTube channel. I've started just kind of using it, but the actual episode will also be a podcast thing. So we're going to do like a little intro for you that I put up. And then when I get all the facts wrong, you can yell at me. And then we're just going to take it easy. You know, the week's episode was going to be Hellraiser 3, but obviously if we get into a conversation and we deter off, then screw the listeners. That's what we're doing. So.
Oh yeah, I will. My intent is to follow your lead wherever it may be.
Oh, that's not good.
Only Hellraiser 3. None of that Hellraiser 4 bullshit. We only got to do
that fucking Alan Smithy piece of shit. Jesus Christ.
Hey, at least you released the original script out there eventually, so that's fine.
That's true. Yeah.
No, but yeah, anything you want to talk about, you know, we're very it's a podcast, no one listens, we're very free flowing, you know, so I'm sure he'll be great.
Yeah. Well, well, you think, I'm sure you have many, but it's so weird the way you've got to, I don't know how you round people up. Weirdly enough, that my friend who was just leaving a message when you called, I used to do a live show once a year called the Rolling Darkness Review with him. He's another horror writer, Glenn Hirschberg. And when the lockdown started, we thought we started a YouTube channel where we put up free, we'd read stories from the shows we used to do every week for free. And we loaded about 6 or 7 stories each, and then we just stopped in a fucking sulk because it's like the view figures were 7, 11, 4, and it was just like, oh fuck, you know. So
yeah, I
you
have
got-
no
you
idea
got
how
11?
algorithms work.
my hat is always off to people who just, you know, power through and build up
Here I am
viewerships,
thinking,
readerships, whatever you call it.
here I am thinking, shit, 11, damn.
Yeah, it's a good day.
Yeah,
Whoa.
way to
I'm
show off,
exaggerating.
Peter. Jesus.
It was 5. Fuck. Give me my dreams, son of a bitch. Fuck.
Well, if anybody can't tell, I guess to kick this whole thing off, we are joined today by writer Peter Atkins, author of the novels Morning Star, Big Thunder, and Moontown, but you may recognize them, at least if you're listening to the show, more so as the screenwriter of Hellbound, Hellraiser II, Hellraiser III, Hell on Earth, which I said it was, of course, today's episode, but we'll just loosely use that. Hellraiser IV Bloodline, which we won't talk about to make Peter feel better, and Wishmaster. In addition, Peter Atkins has had short fiction appear in several best-selling anthologies, such as The Museum of Horrors, Dark Delicacies 2, and Hellbound Hearts, as an anthology of 21 Hellraiser-related short stories. Peter's been selected more than 8 times for one or more of various year's best anthologies and is a 3-time nominee for the British Fantasy Award, most recently for his collection Rumors of the Marvelous. And if any of this is wrong, I took this from your website, Peter, so this is all on you.
Oh yeah, well that hasn't been updated for 8 years.
Yeah,
so-
I noticed that. So I just like, that's good enough.
No, that was all. That's all I think accurate, and it's just I sound very full of myself. I'm sorry I put all that information up on there.
Yeah, the
But
only thing I
it's-
can put up
but-
on a bio is like guy that does podcasts, guy that likes hockey, bartends,
right,
don't
right.
talk to, don't approach.
Well, you know, it's funny. I don't know. Maybe this might be more true in publishing world, but you, without any offense to my fellow authors, newbies, old hands, whatever, you do notice when you get author bios at the back of an anthology, you know, a multi-author collection, an anthology, people who are sort of, let's just say young and eager, starting out, or, you know, whatever, whether they're actually young, but starting out, the bios are like 47 lines long and they list every fucking story they've ever placed anywhere and the school. And then, you know, if you're lucky enough to be in the same volume as Stephen King, you'll notice Stephen King is a writer who lives in Maine. That's it. You know, 'cause he probably has a sense he doesn't need to explain who the fuck he is. So every time I can shave a line off my bio, I think, oh, I'm making it. I'm approaching single line anonymity. That's
Yeah, well, you could probably shorten it down to 1 line after this. Did Groovy Lil Spookshow podcast career ended?
there you go.
Yeah,
That'll do
perfect.
it.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to say that you're the first Liverpoolian we've ever had on the podcast. So
And I'd like to thank you for getting the adjective right. That's it's very impressive.
I've been yelled at by other people that enjoy soccer/football when I was younger. So I've sorted it out.
And I still
well-
pronounce things horribly incorrect no matter
Yes,
what. so-
Scott will always pronounce everything wrong. So
No, Liverpoolian is a weird word. Funny enough, I did a stream last week and the same thing came up, which is why the hell is it Liverpoolian? I don't know. Manchester is Mancunian.
yeah,
Somebody from Liverpool is Liverpoolian. Somebody from London is just a Londoner. That makes sense. But it's some medieval bullshit that's been around since
yeah.
1247, you know.
I was trying to do some research on this the other day because I forget what obscure area came up or something, but I was trying to find, it's like, because like you said, I mean, there's also like Scouse and
There's
calling
the slang ones, yeah. Scouts
Right.
for Liverpool,
Right.
Geordie for Newcastle, you know.
Brummy for Birmingham,
Birmingham,
correct?
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, where the hell did any of these things come from?
Well, we spend a lot of time drunk in Liverpool, so it's probably just people slurred their words and somebody else wrote it down.
Well, that's a nice little parallel coalescence then, that so many people slurred the same way. That's kind of the beauty of natural language, right?
Right. Or alien intervention.
Well, that's
You
most
can't
likely.
be sure.
Yeah.
If it was, no, I don't want to badmouth anyway.
Go for it.
No, go
I
ahead.
know I was
We
going to name
insult
somebody and say,
everybody.
if this was well, I'll pick somebody I know, so then people will know it's a joke. If this was a Tony Randall movie, it would be some fucking moron had come back in time to make sure everybody invented the word brummy. Otherwise, the plague would have wiped us all out in the 23rd century. Wait, Harlan Ellison actually used that plot, right? Demon with a glass hand, wasn't he? Didn't he?
The only Ellison that I remember is the one where the guy goes to, was it the moon or Mars, and ends up just fucking everything. That was a good story. That was very inspirational for me in high school, but I can't remember.
Oh yeah, there's something to aspire to, right?
Yeah, well,
well,
there's
that
not
would
much
be,
left at this
I'm
point.
sure, I was lucky enough to know Harlan, and he would doubtless tell you that story was autobiographical because he claimed to have been an incredible coxman in his youth and was astonishingly proud of it. And he also made shit up all the fucking time. All the time. He would start, I say this with love. He was, you hear some bad stories about Harlan, but he was never anything but nice to me. He was a sweetheart to me. But he would start telling you a story, and it was a real story. You could tell this is anecdotal, this happened, and then it would grow in the telling. And like 5 minutes in, he'd be perched on a mountaintop getting the drop on the sniper that Bill Nolan had hired to kill him because he refused to reprint his story. And yeah, so it could get wild. His house was called Ellison Wonderland. Yeah. It was up on Coy Drive in Sherman Oaks. And it was a fantastic place. I mean, I'm sure it was a perfectly nice house when he bought it. And it's up on a hill, so I'm sure it was good. But he had filled it over the years with, obviously tens of thousands of books, but pulp memorabilia, movie memorabilia, bizarre statues, carving. And he had weird sculptures built on the outside, gargoyles and things. Sorry, this is not the Harlan Ellison podcast.
No,
I'm sure there is a Harlan
please.
Ellison podcast, but I really want to know, because horribly Susan, who was another Brit, who was Harlan's wife, and significantly younger than Harlan, but sadly we lost her a year and a half ago as well. So I don't know who's got that house now and what they will have done to the outside of it, because it was really tailor-made to be the home of Harlan Ellison. It's really not something that would be, you know what, they'll probably fucking knock it down. They knocked Ray Bradbury's house down. So
did they really?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I find like kind of concepts like this fascinating, right? Where you either would have someone buy the house that does not give a shit, like you're saying, and will just knock it down, or someone that's such like a perverse fan that it becomes like this weird, like fetishistic shrine.
Sure. Here's where I rubbed myself against the door jamb,
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know if either solution's really that good.
yeah, I'm not sure which is worse. I guess the second one is actually worse, but it makes for a funnier story.
Sure.
The first one is just people are assholes,
right?
The second one is people are bizarre. That's always better, I guess.
Yeah, at least for the long term.
Yeah.
Scott's all getting antsy. He wants to ask questions.
I'm not getting antsy.
I'd rather
about
do
this
this
random house that Harlan Ellison owns now, and I'm like, damn, I just grew up in a house that was owned by a mobster before, and he happened to be a family friend. and just
That's
being like,
good.
go check the basement, and like sure enough found like a stash hole, and I was like, that's it, it's empty. Like
You
nothing,
didn't
it's
dig
nothing
deep
cool
enough.
about that. It's just like there's nobody buried in the basement. There's no money left behind. I just lived in a house with a guy that was a made dude. That's not cool, but
You got to
Steve
go.
lives in that house
You
all
got
the
to go
time.
deeper than the 6 foot. See, everybody
It
knows
did
it's
look
6
like it
foot.
was a new concrete floor, so
Yeah, come on.
Just
No, that's
smash
pretty
it.
good. That's cool. It always it's an icebreaker at dinner, right?
At the very least.
Yeah.
yeah, that's so much different being a bartender and having people just talk at me. I really get it when I do these interviews and episodes now. And I'm like, holy fuck, these just go on and on and on. But to kind of, I don't know, start off, talk about stuff. You were a Liverpoolian, is a new word I've learned today. So that's
Yeah.
something. You were obviously schoolmates with Clive Barker, I believe, and Doug Bradley. And that's kind of how the dog company
Sure.
started. I don't think a lot of people that are, I would say, horror fans are well aware of the dog company, but it was a pretty big thing because it kind of brought all of you all together. Do you have any like funny stories, kind of just how that all happened? Because I know like Clive started off doing things in grade school and high school, but you all kind of
Yeah.
seem to have gotten pulled into the current in a way.
That's exactly. Let's just leave it at that. That was a perfect summation. Yeah, it was. Actually, technically, I didn't go to the same high school. Clive and Doug both went to the same school. I went to school with a guy whose older sister was a school friend of Clive and Doug. So we met, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, we met in 1974. And it's really kind of you to say, it was a great thing. It was like, nobody thought that at the time. Let me assure you, there was it was like being in a band that only ever played your friend's school dance kind of thing.
Yeah. I've done the garage band thing a couple times.
We'd outnumber the audience more often than not. But it was great. It was like being in a band. I've spent my whole life really. I really like collaborative art. I've been in bands pretty much all my life. I've been involved in theater nearly all my life, and hanging on film sets is, well, you actually get paid for that, so that's a little better. But it's the same principle. But yeah, Dog Company was around for about 10 years. I was with them from 74 to about 1980, and then I moved back to Liverpool to form another band. But it was where I met Clive and Doug and where we all bonded, and it was a great experience. But it's kind of like Woodstock, where there's that famous thing people say that if everybody who claims they were at Woodstock was actually at Woodstock, they would have filled the state of New York. And Doug Company was, in retrospect, people now say, people. Tiny pond, big fish. But Hellraiser fans are like, oh man, I wish I could have seen the glorious Dog Company productions. And it's like, where were you when we needed you? There was, but it was a great kickoff to I guess lifelong collaborations and friendships. So, yeah.
Okay, before we detract, or allow me to detract, what instruments you play? And you said you've been in bands all your life. We're both big music nerds. So what was kind of...
Well, me too. I'm a big music nerd. I play guitar. A friend of mine once said, "Oh, Pete plays piano too." You guys will know what I mean by this. I do not play piano. I play songwriter's piano, which means with my left hand, I can make clumsy, badly fingered triads like strumming a guitar to work out a melody with the right hand. That is not playing the piano. So I've played bass in other friends' bands, but I'm mainly a guitar player.
Oh, right on.
And let me hasten to add, not a good one.
All right, I tell people I play bass badly all the time, and they usually leave that be. So, what are your little musical influences then? Because I love picking people's brains about music.
Sure. I am very small C Catholic in my tastes. I like pretty much a bit of, I mean, obviously, you know, I'm rock and roll era. I like pre-rock and roll music, but mainly simpler. Like, I'm not a big modern jazz fan. The cleverer jazz is, the less I fucking like it. But the great songwriters that came out of jazz in the 30s and 40s, I love all that stuff. But you know, I'm a rock and roll kid. I was born right in the middle of the 1950s. So it was the primary music of my youth, right through to the point at which rock stopped being the mainstream, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's probably sadder for you guys because you're even younger, you're like 30 fucking years younger than me, quite a bit younger. But it's not the mainstream anymore, right? I mean, EDM and rap is, I know there are still rock bands, don't get me wrong. I know there are 23-year-olds who play guitar in bands, but it doesn't matter anymore, right? It's not.
Yeah. The thing I found very interesting about it is, while the predominant, you know, pop music has definitely moved towards, like you're saying, EDM, rap, a lot of that kind of influence stuff, though it's simultaneously, if you're willing to look, it's probably the best time because of the atomization of the way the music is distributed.
Sure.
It's like you can find the most specific granular subgenres of, you know, neo, post, you know, avar, metal step or whatever on Spotify, and you can find that kind of stuff. And it's it's been, despite the rapacious ways in which these people, you know, these streaming services work, like it also, the barrier to entry is much lesser. Like I you know, they're not great, it's not huge releases, but I even have like a couple songs on Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff, because it's like you pay $20 to like a distributor and they can be on there. And like that's all it takes.
No,
now.
Absolutely. It's weird. It's very similar in publishing and movies as well. What's happened in all three fields is we've seen like the mid-list or the middle class in a way destroyed. But that's the downside. The upside, as you say, is that the democratization of the technology has allowed everybody, you make a movie on your iPhone, upload it to YouTube. There you go, you're a filmmaker. Write a book, upload it through KDP. There's a Kindle ebook. Put your song on Bandcamp, Spotify, you know, whatever, all those things. So yeah, it's great that access and availability to the technology and in, see, I wouldn't really call it distribution, because the problem is nobody, like I said with the Rolling Darkness Review YouTube channel, nobody knows it's out there. But but yeah, you're right. It is, you can put the stuff out there, and then you got to have a whole second career finding ways to tell people that it's out there, because that used to be the record company's job or the publishing house's job or the movie studio's job.
Right.
And yeah, so it's very swings and roundabouts. There's a lot of pluses and a lot of minuses. And I'm fascinated by the fact that, you can really go like deep diving for, well, I like this music and this was the aspect of it I liked, so now I can really boil it down. But here's my guilty secret, which will render me contemptible in the eyes of hip young fellas like yourself. I like the granular deep dive stuff because, you know, I'm a genuine music fan, nerd, and practitioner. But the truth is, I was always kind of a top 40 guy, in the sense of I liked stuff that broke through, whatever the form, whether it was R&B, soul, Motown, pop, rock, any subdivision of rock. The stuff I tend to like really was the populist stuff. It was the stuff that enough people liked that it would like get people on the dance floor. You'd hear it on the radio 10 times a day. And so even though I appreciate the fact that music's out there, it's like, yeah, but I want it, I want it to be the cultural mainstream conversation. Otherwise it feels a little I don't know. I don't know what.
No, I agree. I mean, it's one thing I've always hated it, which is like, I've always listened to like more obscure stuff and different genres of metal and whatever, but I've always enjoyed like all streams of music and even the popular stuff. And I think there's this like aspect where these kind of they've been called different things all throughout history, the hipsters or the cork sniffers or whatever, that like that will refuse and immediately completely disregard anything that's like popular. But there's a reason why it gets popular, and I think, like you say, it's more interesting, especially if you're into like the history of it and stuff, which is something that I tend to nerd out on, where there is an aspect of like seeing where things break through.
Sure.
And how, like you said, I mean, something I always found fascinating specifically, people kind of talk about it as like one hit wonder, kitschy or whatever, but Take on Me, aha, it's like,
oh yeah, no, that's a great example.
but
And
to come out of nowhere,
some of my favorite records are one hit wonders. It's
right?
Like somehow this bunch of weirdo morons they got lightning in a bottle. They walked into it. I'm not talking about aha. They actually
No, sure.
The hits
No, they did. Yeah.
Oh, Swedish morons.
But yeah, but
Norwegian.
Or Norwegian, sorry.
But yeah, it's like there are just those beautiful lunatic one-offs in the history of pop music, where it's like, what happened that day that made this thing that we all are still listening to 60 years later,
Yeah, and it's I think music, this is where I get into my woo woo kind of stuff, but music very much so is like a primal kind of thing. Like it's one of those things where you listen to and you go, I like it or I don't like it. It's like when the quickest like value judgments that like aesthetic judgments in general, but like specifically musical, it's one of those things that like you can actually have a physical aversion to it, as well as having like subjectively being like, no, you look at art, you might go, oh, my eyes, as a joke, but it's never going to physically hurt you.
Yeah.
But like people will hear something, go no, and like actually be like having a physical reaction because they don't like the timbre of whatever they're hearing,
Sure. No, it's exactly right. And I think that's sort of that sidestep of the intellect directly to the emotion or the instinct or the viscera. There was the 19th century, he was kind of an art critic / philosopher. Walter Pater had this famous phrase, which is all art aspires to the condition of music, by which he meant that it's like literature and even the pictorial arts like painting, they're trapped in, they can't avoid meaning and literal meaning. Whereas music, you can certainly programmatize it, you can certainly parse it, you can analyze it with words. But exactly what you're saying, he saw the same thing and said that. And he said that's what we all want to do with the other arts as well. And music somehow can just do it directly. And you're so right about the individual ear and the individual taste. I'm sure you guys have friends as well. I've got hardcore music nerd scholar friends who kind of like everything and also don't really like anything, because I'm very visceral in my reactions. I'm a loudmouth, hideous, opinionated, that shit kind of guy, or that's fucking brilliant kind of guy. And my perfectly reasonable and intelligent friends will explain to me why the stuff I don't like is good. And I'll patiently explain to them that, yeah, I know the guy's got chops. I know it's good. I'm not suggesting there aren't skills at play here. I just fucking hate it. And that's, I think that's the difference between a genuine music enthusiast and, well, I don't want to put anybody down for being a scholar, because I mean, I'm a scholarly obsessive about this stuff too. But I think you only truly get music if you love and hate forms of music. If all music is interesting, you don't really like music. There's the stuff that presses your buttons in all the right ways, and the stuff that presses your buttons in all the wrong ways. And I sort of trust even if we totally disagree. Like you said, metal. I was never really a metal guy. I was that generation. The first band I ever saw live was Deep Purple, but then glam rock came along, which was a much more pop. T-Rex, Roxy Music.
I love T-Rex. Yeah.
That's well, yeah, because T-Rex is a nice crossover. Because Bolan's guitar, like Mick Ronson's guitar and the Spiders, it's such a big fucking sound.
Yeah.
That it's as good as a rock guitar sound, but it's in the service of prettier melodies, in my opinion. But so like I've never really been a metal fan, while appreciating again the talent. I forget where I was going with that, but some of my favorite arguments or discussions are with friends who are metal fans because they love that stuff. And I like people. I love people who love stuff.
See, it's Scott and I always talk about this. There comes to a point where even as metal guys, like some of the music fans we hate the most are metal fans, because because it becomes this thing where
more metal than thou.
Yeah, exactly. Not just like enjoying a song or just enjoying something or even looking into it on a little bit of a deeper level. But I do find that in general, I don't know, maybe it's a problem with the way that like we've come to a point, and to me, where everyone's kind of like amateur aesthetes, and not like there's no criticism around that's like valid anymore, but everyone has a little bit of the language for the most part that they attempt to, and so nothing can just simply be either you're enjoying it as like a neophyte, or now all of a sudden you're kind of in that Dunning-Kruger mode where you've read one Pitchfork review and now you're talking
you're
talking about the mouth feel of a cymbal or whatever. And
like this album is 6.98 out of 14.
Nice.
What Pitchfork scale?
Sure.
I think for me, kind of rounding out this conversation a bit, my biggest disappointment, I think, with a lot
Daddy
of
Scott
things,
wants us to stop having fun, is what's happening.
No
He's
fun.
got more
No.
questions.
No. I want to piggyback off.
We can move this analogy directly to horror movies,
of course.
well, because there's an awful lot of horror where I'm told I should like it. Like in music, people explain why X. Oh, not X, not the movie that just came out. The metaphoric X is good. And again, it's the same deal with me. Often it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. There are good performances here. There's an idea at work. I still fucking hate it.
I think I can guess some of the films you're probably referencing, but do you have any examples you want to?
Of things I don't like?
Yeah.
Do I look like an amateur to you? I'm going to be drawn into this?
Just want a soundbite.
Yeah.
You got to make something happen. No, I know exactly. That's something that we talk about a lot on here, because I have a background in philosophy, and so I try to make that worth something. And so this is what I do, because this obviously I don't use that at my job.
Right.
But it very much so comes down into I feel so much about what we're talking about, both when it comes to music or horror. It really is rooted in like that, like pure, like basic, like existential, like identity kind of thing, where you just take now like you're glomming onto something, and that becomes your personal value, instead of having to own up to that responsibility of one's own action. Now you say, well, I'm a metal fan or I'm a horror fan, and so that means now the things that you like are extensions of yourself. So if you say, I actually don't like these A24 movies, I think that they're actually they're a little bit too up their own ass.
They're certainly fond of themselves. Apparently, if you want to work for A24, you have to fill out a questionnaire explaining which are your favorite A24 movies.
Really?
I don't know. That sounds so apocryphal to me. So somebody swore to me it was true. But if it is true, fuck them. And if it isn't true, they want to watch out that stories like that feel true. You know, they should
because no one goes, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Most people say, yeah, I'd buy that. That sounds right.
And I like a lot of those movies, but then there becomes a thing where if you're the guy where you want to say, well, I'm a horror fan, and now you want to separate yourselves from the lowly muck that like loves, you know, slasher and you know giallo gore bullshit, and you say, well, I'm a fan of the quote unquote elevated horror. It's a phrase that Scott and I hate.
Kill him. As soon as that phrase comes out of their mouth, fuck it.
Right. But you then will. Now, I'm not just a horror fan, I'm an elevated horror fan. And then if someone comes out and goes, actually, Lamb is just a bunch of bullshit, then now you're not only attacking the thing I like, you're attacking me.
Right.
You're attacking me because I like it. And
Well, it seemed more common when we were kids, though, when like before really the internet became what it is. I mean, we grew up with the beginning of that, but like you'd go to school and somebody'd hand you like a CD of songs they liked, and you'd listen to it and be like, dude, this fucking sucks. But you'd have a conversation about it because you were like organically exploring music. Someone's like, here, listen to this. You go into a bookstore to find a book. You know, we're big physical media people here. Like we go find like records. We have an obscene record collection like that. Seems to be what's super missing nowadays is that you just go on the internet and you type in something and you get the suggestions. Well, and
you don't have the real life. I mean, I'm sure people still do. I hope they still do. But, you know, one of the like primal, you know, the thing that forms you as people is rowing with your best friend about what records are good. Yeah. And it was, you know, obviously I'm way older than you guys, so it was all physical media. There was nothing else. And, you know, I would go to my best friend Terry's house and he would try to persuade me that Pink Floyd and the Moody Blues were better than T-Rex and Roxy Music. And when he came to my house, I would force my shit on him. And we would get very wordy about it, very aggressive. And the weird thing was, of course, that now, whenever I hear the Moody Blues or Pink Floyd, well, especially Pink Floyd, because they're actually good. Still not that big on the Moody's, but I have, there's just this nostalgic pleasure of, oh my God, yeah, this was Terry's favorite band. I heard this album 25 times because the fucker wouldn't stop playing it. And it would be the same for him. And yeah, that's a very important, I don't know, you know, character forming thing to have those real time, real life fights about shit with your friends.
Right. But the difference then too, and this is me sounding like I'm an old man and not, you know, 30, but the difference with then too is when you're sitting there defending T-Rex to Terry, you're not also then in your off time going online and specifically searching for people who
to have fights with
people people who said that, you know, Mark Bolan's just a sissy that can't play guitar,
right?
You know, you weren't specifically trying to find those people to validate your, you know, maybe if I argue with this guy online good enough about why T-Rex is good, then I'll be a better T-Rex fan, and thus I'll be more valid as a human.
Yeah, no, we all fall into those traps all the time. And I mean, obviously, you know what.
I mean, that's why I have a podcast.
We just want to be jackasses and have people listen.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the base of tribalism. I mean, this is, well, in a way, I don't even want to say the problem because it's just the human. Right. But this is where tribalism comes from. That identification, that over-identification with something outside yourself. And yes, certainly, I guess the internet has made even easier and more accessible the possibility to pick fights. Also, you know, in the safety of physical absence of the person with whom you're fighting, because we used to get mouthy with each other, but there was, if you're arguing with, you know, I don't know, you got a Def Leppard fan and an Iron Maiden fan, if they're in a pub in 1977, there's going to be limits to the kind of names they call each other. Otherwise, it's going to get physical. But the trolling that goes on the internet, I mean, you know, at the risk of sounding like people who were old men when I was young, it's like, let's see that kid say that in real life. There's consequences.
But it's so true though. Like I bartend
Sure.
and like I have so many regulars where we have conversations about books. I have a guy that we trade books all the time. I got people I talk of music with, and it's like that where we'll have these conversations and we do get a little brave and kind of quip at each other, but you're
Sure.
actually having a conversation. When you're online, it's essentially just you're so limited into what you can say and what you can
Right.
do, and that becomes the identity, not trying to get to
Right.
some sort of, I don't know, content, or some sort of,
Sure.
meaning behind the argument. It's just, I guess waving a flag and then being cool with it. And then if you try to oppose that, you get
Right.
attacked. I'm a very opinianated dude, as anybody that listens to the show will know,
Sure.
seeing me on Twitter, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
like you can't do it as well, I don't think.
Right. But also, I mean, the other thing, that the truth that when we're caught up in those arguments, we can never learn this on a visceral level, because the truth is you will never persuade somebody to like something they don't like.
No.
You might, if you're both reasonable, decent people with open minds, you might hear the arguments and at best understand why they like it.
Yeah.
But the here's why you're wrong and why they're good school of thought is like that. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't like musicals, nobody is going to talk you into liking a musical. If you don't like Kandinsky, nobody's going to talk you into liking Kandinsky. It's, I guess like all generalizations, that is not true. A perfectly reasonable argument can occasionally open somebody's eyes. Like if I hear, as opposed to aggression, if I hear enthusiasm for, I'm trying to keep it on topic, Scott, for horror
I don't
movies.
care. I'm having fun regardless.
If I hear
Perfect.
enthusiasm for Nightmare on Elm Street 3, then you look back at Nightmare on Elm Street 3, it's like, oh, well, okay, you've made me see there's something else to look. I don't know why I'm picking on Nightmare 3, by the way.
That's my favorite one, actually.
I can't even remember which one it is. So
Dream Warriors.
There was nothing specific. Oh, that
Dream
was Dream
Warriors.
Warriors?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
right,
the one-
right.
It's the one with the badass Dawkins song.
Yeah, right.
The only good Dawkins song.
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the thing, though, too, is that what you do when you have those conversations like we're doing now, though, I think there is an inclination sometimes when you don't hear something you like, or you're listening to something and don't know why, those conversations are important because you can kind of latch on to whatever that detail or that nuance is, whether it's a certain instrument, the way it sounds in a song, or the way certain things are
Right.
written in books, that you can't really, again, you don't have really, you have a whole audience on Twitter, but there's no guarantee they're reading anything you're saying. We're having conversations like this, and you've got no choice but to interact,
Sure.
And I think that's kind of the difference in a way too, is that when you can't have those conversations, whether because they're not allowed or they get lost, you don't get anything out of them. And that's always been kind of the thing
Right.
with the social media thing. I say this too, because unfortunately I'm a substitute teacher, so I'm corrupting young kids as well. But I've had those conversations, like we'll talk about stuff and I'll say, well, why do you like this? And they can't tell you why. They can tell you why their friends do and why other people do, but they don't know why they
Right.
like something. And that's
Yeah.
always freaks me out a little bit, because I always just felt so opinionated as a kid, still now especially, but people know that.
But yeah, I'm with you. I sort of have a rule in like public, because, as I'm sure you guys know as well, once you're a practitioner, you do get the sense of nobody wants to make a bad record. Nobody wants to make a bad movie. Nobody wants to write
Right.
a bad book. So I really, like I wasn't kidding earlier when I said, you think you're going to trap me into say, I just try not to say publicly bad things.
No, of course.
About, stuff, because it's like, they didn't want to make a piece of shit.
No.
So like you, Scott, I'm very opinionated all my life, but I will say this in defense of your kids: stop picking on them, teacher. Leave those kids alone.
Oh, thank you.
They
They're getting no
when
pudding
you
either.
say- but it's like, no, I've been opinionated all my life. It's the most difficult question is, why do you like it?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's the hardest thing to articulate. You can answer it in the abstract, which, well, we said earlier, forget if it was me or you said, use the button pushing thing. It pushes the right buttons, pushes the wrong buttons.
Mhm.
you usually tend to, or at least I tend to fall very quickly into babble, well, it's good, it was scary, it was moving, and of course, the half of the sentence where I was missing out is I found it moving, I found it scary.
Right.
Other people might not. The reasons why we like that, I don't know if this is an interesting conversation, because I've never tried to boil it down to this before, but the reasons we like things are probably extremely limited and extremely niche and extremely specific. Except those guys, as I say, friends I've got who kind of like everything, because what they're interested in is how things are different and how things are similar, as opposed to just, wow, that rocks, like getting off on something.
Well, yeah.
Like you can analyze things that you like. Like I like snappy dialogue. I like drone shots. I like, but I think it's a tough question to ask people. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't ask your kids this. I think it's a good question to ask people, but it's kind of tough to answer. I don't know how to form an answer that's honest, as opposed to an intellectual construct.
Yeah,
because we can all learn very quickly ways to say, oh, I admire, although it's a long novel, I admired the architecture, the pacing was maintained. You can do all that bullshit, but that's not where you like something.
Exactly. I get into this with my girlfriend a lot, because she's not as like into film and whatever as I am. So I'll watch something with her and ask her, did you like that? And she goes, yeah. And I go, why? And she goes, because I like it. And then I try to answer the same thing.
You got to back off at that point, man. Take yes for an answer.
And then I will try to do the same thing. And then I realize I'm essentially, at the end of the day, I'm doing the same exact thing she is, but with more words. Because if I say, if I do say that's the stuff, the pacing, or I like the score, or I enjoyed these characters, what it fundamentally says is it's still like, well, even if there's like this technical expertise on an artistic level of whether it's the cinematography or the acting, it still results in the ultimate same thing, which is me enjoying it.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between just going, I liked it, and I liked it because of this 1,000-word, essay that I'm gonna. It's the same fucking thing. Like,
sure.
It's like how Jenna is too with the show. She does the show with us sometimes. She was too nervous to do it because she was like, I don't want to talk to somebody famous. I'm a moron. We do that same thing though. We're like, I watch a movie.
Who were you gonna have on the show that said no? Then you brought me on. You had somebody famous lined up. What the fuck?
No, just my girlfriend who's a pain in the ass. But we'll do the same thing. Steve does with Michelle, and I'll be like, okay, so did you like this? And she's like, I think so. And then I start spitting out facts because I'm the kind of person, I'm obsessive compulsive. So I'm like, I like this movie. Now I must know everything about this movie. So I can have a conversation with people about it. And I think it is kind of one of those weird things where sometimes you can kind of get caught up in so much of why you like it, where I almost am jealous at times when Jenna's like, I liked it because it was just a good time, or it was funny, or it was horror that I liked. And I'm like, God, I wish my brain worked like yours, because the gears are always moving, and sometimes it's just like you derail yourself a little bit. So
you can't. Yeah, I mean, we're all made that way, obviously. But we're all, whatever that tribe is, we're clearly all three members of it. But that is the trap. Like, you don't want. I used to like. I needed to know all the credits on every movie, learn the DP's name, learn the editor's name. And now I'm blissfully ignorant about all that stuff again, because you do, like, it's fun to know that stuff. It is, but and one does feel that it sort of bolsters your affection for the specific work and validates your standing for the field in general. And I certainly don't want to be so reductionist as suggest it's a male brain, female brain thing. But like your girlfriends, my wife tends to have a more, I like it, I hate it, without necessarily feeling the need to prepare an intellectual defense of the position.
I think that's what
And,
happens growing up as a metalhead, and I think Steve will do this too.
oh,
Is that
maybe.
especially in the metal community, is if you don't know certain things. I remember growing up
Oh,
in high
no.
school and kids being like, "Dude, then you're a poser. You don't know who the session
Right,
guitarist
right.
was on the third album by Morbid Angel, then you don't like the band. Go fuck yourself." Like that's a
Sure.
very metalhead thing, I
Yeah.
think, where it's
Well,
like
I
if
think
you
that's
don't
a very
have those details, all of a sudden you're like
right.
about to be shot in the firing line, kind of.
Sure. But I think I'm sure it's a metalhead thing because I had enough metalhead friends to know that was true in the first wave of heavy metal, let alone
Yeah.
whatever the hell wave we're up to now. But I think that's just a teenage thing. I mean, that is because we're all finding ways to individuate ourselves and make ourselves feel special and move up in the rankings. And, those things about, oh, yeah, well, Roger Glover wasn't on the third album, actually. I remember the joy of scoring points, like that, like, making somebody look wrong because they got a little fact wrong about something. And I think that's just a teenage thing. I think that's a thing we all do. But whatever nerds we are, whether it's horror movie nerds, metal nerds, polka nerds, I don't fucking know. You want to be an expert in your field. And I soon learned that I could never be enough of an expert. They have a horror trivia contest out at one of the great stores here in Burbank. It's been online for the last couple of years. And Jared Rivet and Rebecca McKendry, people, and it's like people have said to me often, you should come along to the, and it's like, no, I would be so fucking bad at this because, like you're saying, Scott, they know everything.
Oh yeah,
everything. Who was the second unit camera operator on Sleepaway Camp Massacre 3? It's like, if you don't know that, don't even open the door. Don't come in. And I don't.
Well, it's like when we first started the show off before Steve joined, I did the first Hellraiser because it's one of my favorite movies and I love Clive Barker. And I tried to throw a lot of facts in and make it. Steve's seen the original scripts for the show we used to do. They're research papers.
Right.
But I never felt confident that I knew everything. But I almost accidentally had that no moment, ironically enough, of Doug Bradley's wife, who's on Instagram. She's going, well, you got that wrong. And I'm like, listen, late. Oh, shit. It's been like, no, just go ahead and school me. I'm really wrong. She goes, okay, I got this for you. And I'll explain everything. And I'm like, okay. That was such a much more fun, humbling experience than some guy going, well, you know what? Fuck you,
Sure. But also, I'm you're talking about Steph, right?
Yeah,
Steph. Because you're too young. Wow. I shouldn't get into it in case Doug. My default in my head is Lynn, who was his first wife, who was in Dog Company with us years ago. But I'm sure Steph does get things right, probably more than Doug, Clive, or I would, because I don't know, you think your own memory is infallible for so long, and you got this to look forward to, guys. As you move into your 40s and your 50s, you'll see documentary or photographic evidence that it's like, oh shit, that story I've been telling for 25 years, it looks like it couldn't possibly be true. Robert Englund isn't even in that photograph, So often I do trust the scholars roster of opinions more than I trust the practitioner's memory. But you're right to trust Steph. She would know. Doug, he's got everything mixed up. That pin's driven into his fucking head for decades. He knows nothing anymore. Full of holes.
Okay, since we're kind of talking about Hellraiser now, because that was a beautiful segue on my part.
Oh God,
I know they're so awful. So we'll talk a little Hellraiser and we'll get back off course, which has been a lot more fun. So we mentioned Tony Randall earlier. You worked with him on Hellbound. He was directing on that, and then you were doing that screenplay, and you both kind of worked together on Hell on Earth, to my understanding, to where you both were kind of contributing to that screenplay. What's it like, especially given Clive's involvement in the third movie, you know? How is that kind of
I'm sorry, I spoke over you, Scott. I'm
it's
sorry.
okay. It's okay. So, like, you know, you got Clive, who's not really involved majorly in this film. I know they brought him in as executive producer kind of after the fact to get
in post-production.
Yeah. So what's it like to kind of come up with these ideas that are Clive's ideas that started in the Hellbound Heart and we saw in the film, and trying to bring this universe kind of and expand it, you know, in another movie? It's got to be a little bit strange to have that level of collaboration with someone like Clive, who's at that, you know, at this point pretty well known.
Yeah, it was. Well, a couple of things. Obviously, I'm fully aware, and was fully aware in 1987 that Clive had already become Clive Barker. But he was also Clive, the guy I'd known since 1974. So it's like, in a way, he wasn't Clive Barker to me. But I knew he'd made a fantastic movie in Hellraiser. It hadn't been released, by the way, so I didn't have the pressure of, oh shit, I'm writing a follow-up to a hit movie. But I did have the pressure of, oh shit, I'm writing the follow-up to a good movie. I guess what was great is that it was a fairly seamless flow through, because Clive and I came up with the basic story for Hellbound together, and then he was off doing something else, and I wrote the screenplay, did a couple of drafts. Then they brought Tony Randall in, and I wrote, I can't remember now if it's the third or the fourth draft, sort of very much with his input. You know, I would have meetings with him. I kept writing it, but he would put his stamp on it, onto that final draft I did. So I know that was a question about Hellraiser 3, but I think what helped was Hellraiser 2 was literally a sort of fun collaboration with Clive, write the thing mostly on your own, fun collaboration with Tony. So it was like a top and tail thing, an existing relationship, a new relationship. And at that point, like when you're in a band, you know, if you're the new Rolling Stone, you're going to feel awkward the first time you suggest to Keith Richards, perhaps not a D, you know, do the F sharp minor, it'll rhyme. But once you've been in the band, it varies, you know, 2 months, a year, whatever it is. You feel that you're part of the flow, part of the team. So by the time we were making number 3, I mean, I don't want in any way to downplay, but we didn't know guys as young as you would still be liking this shit 30 years later, right? So we didn't have any sort of reverse hindsight pressure of, we're making films for the ages here, guys, get it right. It was just, we were doing the next one. You know, it was like, we still couldn't believe our luck. You know, we were in the film business suddenly. I mean, Clive, me and Doug had been in theater, which meant we were on welfare effectively, because we certainly weren't making a living from it. And then I was in bands playing pubs and clubs in Liverpool, technically making a living, but, you know, just, and now we were making movies, and it was still kind of fresh and new. So in a way, there wasn't a lot of reflection, I guess, is what there wasn't room for, because I couldn't sit back and take a philosophical analysis of, where are we on this, and how responsible am I to what came before, and what seeds am I sowing for what comes ahead. It was like, fuck, I got to get this third draft in by next Tuesday. So it was always like a pragmatic thing of, Did you do your 8 pages today, Pete? Oh, you didn't. So I don't know if that even answers your question. It
answers it and a whole lot more. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to, do honor to Clive's original creation. I wanted to make the fans happy, because by the time we were doing 3, unlike by the time I was writing 2, both movies had been hits. So we did feel a certain responsibility to the franchise and the tribe. But of course, Hellraiser 3 is the one that we started getting split decisions on. A lot of people really like it, I'm glad to say. But a lot of people really felt, they've sold out now. Hellraiser is just another slasher movie now. It's full of wise ass one-liners and like we were saying before, you can't persuade people to like or dislike a movie. They either like or dislike it. But it was interesting that there was a bifurcation among Hellraiserdom at that point. Ask me another. I've run out of bullshit on
Perfect.
that one.
That's a pretty good segue for a question that I had, which is these films and other films that you're attached to have kind of fallen into that nebulous term that some people love and hate, which is cult films.
Right.
And so I was curious, especially as, and not to blow smoke up your ass, but as someone who's also an accomplished writer of various other media, not just screenwriting.
Oh, sure.
And I would say that the acclaim is definitely there for your writing more so than one might say for Fist of the North Star, like other, that people don't think, people will talk about horror writers and talk about you, and then people will talk about the Hellraiser franchise and whatever in a different kind of way, because it's still beloved, but it is now this cult thing, not this like, well, there's always this like kind of tongue-in-cheek of like, yeah, but his writing's actually good or whatever kind of a thing. These movies are just fun or whatever. Is that something that, I mean, is that something you ever think about, or is that kind of that whole idea of the cult film or cult anything, does that really ever mean it? Does that mean anything to you as the actual artist?
I don't know. I guess it depends on the term, the definitions we're using for cult, because there can be cult movies that are beloved because they're so fucking bad, and there are cult movies that are beloved because it makes us all feel special that we're smart enough to like this movie and most people aren't.
I think there's a healthy dose of both.
Yeah.
And for Hellraiser specifically, I'd say there's a healthy dose of both. But again, there's also the aspect, of course, where you didn't write every single Hellraiser movie. The ones where people say this is so fucking
God,
bad.
no, I haven't even seen them.
Why would you? Some of them, but in that Hellraiser fandom, like you're saying,
sure,
people aren't talking about Hellraiser 2 and Hellraiser 3 in the same breath that they're talking about Hellworld. That those,
right.
Hellraiser 2 and 3 are like, these are good sleeper movies. Hellworld is Hellworld.
Is that the one Ashley came back for, or she came back?
I can't remember. I thought that was Deader. I might be
mishmashing
my 5 through 10 timeline there.
Well, not to be flippant in it, but obviously I'm happy that I'm in the first group, not the second. But I'm seriously. I mean, I made a joke about it earlier, but the fact that people still find pleasure in stuff that is now 33 years old, 30 years old, 25, it's a weird year for me. It's the 30th anniversary of Hellraiser 3 and the 25th anniversary of Wishmaster is both this year. First of all, it's just shocking to hear those numbers, because it's like, what? How did that happen? But the fact, there's going to be a screening of Wishmaster at the Los Feliz. The American Cinematheque is screening Wishmaster, and I'm going to be there with Andy Devoff and Harry Manfredini, the composer. And yeah, I don't doubt that there's some, maybe even a majority of people who like Wishmaster as dumb fun or as bubblegum movie or whatever, and there's some people that like it as a kind of nostalgic retro, oh, this like horror with physical effects pre-CGI. We get a lot of points now just for being a non-CGI movies.
Of course,
there's people that like things for that reason. And at the risk of being Pollyanna about it all, it's like I'm touched that people watch the movies for whatever reason they want. I mean, I guess I could do without the people who watch them just to laugh at them. I don't want any of my stuff to end up on Mystery Science Theater. Fuck those guys. But it's, I get my taste has always been like we were talking about in music. I have a very, very broad range of taste in film in general and horror movies specifically, which is, although I hate the terms you use, elevated horror or so good it transcends the genre. It's like, fuck that. It's just, maybe it's just a good example of the genre rather than transcending it. But I do, I can like the dumbest balls to the wall slasher flick and things that might perhaps be described by people who should know better as elevated horror. I can like that too. I like the old stuff. I like the new stuff. So I don't know. So I guess I'm happy to be part of the rich tapestry of horror movies history. And I've got that get out clause because, I do have the novels and the short stories. So in a way, I didn't know this was going to turn into a psychoanalysis situation. I'm forced to confront the fact. No, in a way, though, I guess my self-worth isn't directly tied up with why do people like Hellraiser 3? Perhaps it's because they think it's dumb. Like, I hope that's not true for some of the people who like it. But my self-worth isn't entirely tied up with it. So I can just be sort of grateful that they're still being looked at and talked about, I guess. Because and a lot of the movies I like, a lot of the older movies, I grew up watching the Universal movies on TV, and the later Hammer movies were still, I was just about old enough to see the last wave of Hammer movies in the theaters, and the older Hammer movies were also on TV. And I realized that some of the ones that I really like are not perhaps as objectively good as some of the others. And there's no doubt that I think Bride of Frankenstein is a better Universal movie than, well, I don't want to be mean about anything, than like the fourth Mummy sequel.
Sure.
Bride of Frankenstein is objectively better. It has better production values. It has better performances. It seems to be performed by people who give a shit about what's going on. But it doesn't mean I don't like the fourth Mummy sequel, because I do. So,
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to bring in what we were talking about before. I mean, as Scott and I were talking about beforehand, I hate to admit it, but I'm an honest guy. I'm not as big of a Hellraiser guy as Scott is. Scott loves Hellraiser.
Sure.
I enjoy.
I'm a pervert, though, so.
I enjoy it. I do.
Scott is clearly a very handsome and blisteringly intelligent fellow. So.
That's
the soundbite I needed. I'm good. Steve, you take the rest of this now.
But I do enjoy these movies, and it's kind of like what we were saying before to a degree, where even if you I'm not one of the people that enjoys this because it's stupid, but
Yeah.
I'm not, honestly. But even there is kind of a thing where, like, even if they are, if someone is, it's kind of like we were saying before, you can make the whole thing of why it's so dumb, but if you're at the end of the day, you're still enjoying it, you're getting that same you're getting that same reaction from something. And so it's something that I do when I talk about the movies and stuff on here, because when it comes to any art, I think people, like you were just saying about being objectively good, I think people do forget about the objectivity that does exist within art. Like,
Sure.
there are the words on the page, and those are immutable. You can have a different feeling about it, but that is the way that it is. If grammar is incorrect, or something doesn't, or if there's a plot hole, that's objectively there. You can have a different feeling, or you can not give a shit because whatever, when you're looking at it and still enjoy it. But there are still things that are there, like you were saying before. If there's a D chord in the song, there's a D chord in the song. That has a specific sound. It's always going to sound that way. You can feel differently about it depending on how you synthesize that.
Depends how many effects boxes you step on.
Sure.
If you got the flanger, the fuzz, and the reverb, that's going to be a big D.
Right. And then you put that into the effects loop of another amp that's in the effects loop of a third amp.
Don't get me started on that digital shit. That's the reason guitars sound like crap these days. Because when you used to plug into a single box, and the code came out of the box into an amp, what you heard, sorry, I can tell I'm on the soapbox. What you heard coming out of the
I love
amp
this shit.
was the actual sound of your fucking guitar.
Mm-hmm.
What happens now with the digital multi-tone boxes is the signal from, your beautiful 40-year-old Fender Telecaster with its seasoned wood and its aging pickups and your crybaby, whatever the hell. The signal that you send into those digital interfaces is stopped at the digital interface. And the little computer chip says, oh, I see you're playing a C sharp, and you'd like it to sound like Ritchie Blackmore in a blues club in 1964. I have a sound for that. And it will send to the amp a synthesized simulacrum of that. And what you miss is what we were talking about earlier, that big fucking middle. The guitars you said, like Mark Bolan's guitar or Mick Ronson's guitar, or the guys you like, the guys from, well, I don't know which one.
Well, I love Ritchie Blackmore, so continue, please.
Well, sure, yeah. But
and also I want to know specifically which effects you're talking about, because that sounds very appealing to me.
Was it line 6? They were one of the first guys.
Yeah, line 6, the big modelers.
Right. Well, I think, didn't they get as specific as Hendrix at the Marquee 1971?
They did for a lot of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But so I might have made up Ritchie in a blues club. I'm sorry, but I really don't like that. It's like it superficially sounds like an overdriven buzzsaw guitar, but it doesn't, because it hasn't got that middle. When Ritchie in your case, or Ronson in my case, slammed out that, we got off topic, but
I think it is relevant though, because there's a nice analogy there between what you're talking about with not just the obvious one of like, now so much horror has CGI and whatever in it, but it's also kind of like the more malignant side of how democratized it is to create art and everything now, because you can also, for as much as wonderful it is, and you'll get films like Tangerine that are filmed entirely on a phone, and it's amazing. You'll have these countless films that end up on, it's one of those things that, like, as like a nerd, you're almost loath to call a film. Like, that's not a film, that's a movie. That you'll get you'll get on Amazon, and it's all like terrible After Effects, everything, the color corrections to shit. There's the writing's horrible, like, because people can just do it, and then there's no sort of
I never thought ever that I would ever end up being a defender of gatekeepers, because when the gatekeepers started being demolished, I was so happy. It was like, because all these fucking, the people who think they were the white collar people,
Right.
you know, executives or editors, I mean, book editors, not movie editors, the gatekeepers, because they always thought we were just the blue collar. We were the factory floor guys. The creatives were the factory floor thugs, and they
Right.
were the smart white collar workers who decided what was going to reach the public. And now, as you, again, this, I couldn't be politically further away from what I'm about to say. Democracy can go too far. Let me be clear. I do not mean that in a political sense. Quite the opposite. But yeah, it's like, I want a few gatekeepers back. I want a few people to say to, let us say, unseasoned artists, not bad artists. I want a few gatekeepers back to say, you know, you got something here, kid, but stay at home and practice a little more.
Yeah.
Write a second novel before you just upload the first one. And if you put a gun to my head and said, do you want a world composed of middle-class gatekeepers, or do you want this chaos of every asshole can put their work up? I'll go for this. I mean, I prefer this to that, but yeah, exercise a little restraint, folks. You know, learn your craft a bit before you put stuff out.
How do you feel about the argument that a lot of people will make that the oversaturation of stuff like that you're talking about, this kind of like, you know, unmitigated, unwashed masses making all of their little movies and writing their books and getting them self-published for however many hundreds of dollars or whatever, and someone who might be new to something, you know, the average buyer, they'll see some they'll search for, you know, horror on Amazon, and they'll see some random fucking list of 150,000 guys who wrote their bullshit, you know, that's, you know, it's like, what if Dracula was like more evil or whatever bullshit they come up with, but then they'll scroll past Peter Atkins. Do you feel that like there is that, do you think there's like any merit to the argument that this oversaturation is kind of obfuscating actual like good work that's out there, that somehow it's either bringing it down or preventing people from getting towards it?
I think maybe it muddies the water. You know, if there's an awful lot of fish in the pool, you can't see the fish you want, maybe. But I don't know. Again, to call back something we were talking about earlier, when I was defending top 40 as a suitable arbiter for what's good music, that would get me killed in certain clubs in Liverpool. But the thing is, but I think it's still true that if you're wandering through unguided, I guess it's probably even more of a confusing nightmare than it ever was, even when I was young, when we didn't, when there were merely 200 books a year to pick from, you know. But I know it's such a cliche. I'm trying to find a way to pretend I'm not saying the cream will rise to the top, because I hate all cliches, and I particularly but I hate that one conceptually, not just because it's a cliche. But you know, things do get found by people, and there is still word of mouth, and I don't know. I hear, I am attentive to the arguments that you, I know you're citing the argument rather than defending it, but I am attentive to the argument you present, sir. But I don't know that I'd rather roll it back. I don't know. It's tough because there's an awful lot of shit out there. There's a lot of shit music, a lot of shit books, and a lot of shit films. But eventually the shit gets forgotten. Like back I'm sure there's been another year to replace it since, but when I was young, and by the way, I was not alive in 1939 before I finished this sentence. But when I was young, 1939 was just habitually referred to as Hollywood's best year. It was just, you know, acknowledged. They weren't talking about world cinema. They weren't suggesting it was better than Eisenstein or other foreigners, but they were talking about the Hollywood studio system. And they said 1939 was a peak year. The studio system just hit its apex moment. What the hell point am I making? Oh yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing, fellas. In 1939, you didn't only get Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz and the 7 other movies that make everybody say 1939, hell of a year. You also got 300 pieces of shit that nobody remembers.
Right.
Now. And I think that's true of every year there has ever been in any art there has ever been.
Oh, of course.
And are you guys familiar with Sturgeon's law? Have you heard that phrase?
I've heard about it. I don't actually remember what it is.
I don't know the specifics.
This is great. There was a superb science fiction. In fact, he's traditionally referred to as a science fiction author. Like Ray, he never really wrote a science fiction story in his life. He's a fantasist who used the trappings of science fiction occasionally. And it was a beautiful prose stylist. His name is Theodore Sturgeon. And he was a good enough stylist that even the fucking asshole literary snob mainstream people recognized that, like they did with Vonnegut and people, it's like, oh, I guess we've got to pay attention to this guy because he can actually write a good sentence. And they invited, I forget the specific details of it, but they invited into some snooty literary festival. It might have been a New Yorker thing, but anyway, and there was some stick up his ass mainstream snob interviewing Ted. And he said, while stroking Sturgeon, you know, well, of course, you're very, very good. But, and this is the phrase, he said, but wouldn't you agree, Mr. Sturgeon, that 90% of science fiction is crap? And without missing, I wasn't there, because I wasn't born, but reportedly without missing a beat, Sturgeon said, come on, 90% of everything is crap. And that's become known as, apparently there was something else that was Sturgeon's law, but usage is king. And that, because he had a couple of aphorisms, he was quite a smart guy, he was our Ted. But that is now traditionally regarded as Sturgeon's law. And the good thing about that is not the horrific realization that 90% of everything is crap, but the glorious realization that the 10% is what matters.
Right.
And yeah, 90% of science fiction is crap. Of course it is. 90% of metal is crap, but we don't talk about the 90%. I do, because I don't like it. But you guys, of course, you talk about the 10% that's
right.
good. 90% of horror movies are crap, but we'll forget them.
Right.
Each year, you know, the 10% is what counts. And if the thing the point you made earlier, my fear of the deluge that's going on right now is the worst thing it's done is it's probably shoved Sturgeon's percentages a little out of skew. Like maybe now 96% of everything is crap. But again, we'll forget the 96%. It's the 4% that will live, you know, and just to bring it back to our tribe, because we talked a lot about music and other stuff, but to bring it back to our tribe, one of the great things about horror movies is routinely they are dismissed by the intelligentsia and the mainstream. Every generation, it's like, well, that's just shit. That's just shit. While they're singing the praises of some bullshit movie about somebody's feelings when their wife cheats on them with a stew, you know.
A marriage story.
Yeah, but as the years pass, the genre that seems to produce most survivors is horror.
Mhm.
You know, in the long view of history, maybe the Western and the gangster film could also claim that, but not so much in the last 30 years. And what always makes me laugh as a card-carrying pop intellectual, as opposed to a snoot intellectual, is that every generation after the generation of mainstream snobs that put him down pretend they would have liked those movies. So you'll get people now who in 1935, I'll just go back to the one I mentioned earlier, who in 1935 would have said, well, Bride of Frankenstein is just a piece of nonsense. It has no relation to Mrs. Shelley's novel. It's ludicrous, grotesque. Their spiritual descendants would now say, oh, well, of course, Bride of Frankenstein is a masterpiece of,
Right.
of arch camp humor, if nothing else. Look at Ernest Thesiger's pre-liberation gay coding of Dr. They'd find all kinds of things, and they'd be right. Thesiger's performance is fucking fantastic in Bride as Dr. Pretorius. But it's always the current generation of mainstream academics who sneer at the current iteration of stuff that their spiritual descendants will later defend. So we win. It's like we're always right. The fact that, you know, that we like Nightmare on Elm Street 3, you can bet that most mainstream reviewers, when Nightmare on Elm Street 3 came out, didn't have great things to say about it. I can't remember what, well, they're not even intellectual, the Siskel and Ebert, the TV critics. I don't know what they said about Nightmare on Elm Street 3. I know they fucking hated Hellbound. Ebert put it on his 10 worst. It was like me and Tony were devastated. It was like, fuck, our first film and we get on Ebert's 10 worst list. But fuck him, you know, people are still watching Hellbound now. So I don't quite know why I started flying the flag for our team, but I've now finished doing that, and you may ask another question.
Well, I think it's just kind of interesting when you say, we'll call it the Atkins law, where 4% of anything is good.
Yeah.
When you had these conversations.
Let's call it modified Sturgeon's. I am not.
Okay.
I'm not claiming
Modified Sturgeon's law 2.0.
By the way, that it's genius. By the way, and it will stop you feeling anxious about the things you like, because you realize only the 10% matters. This will enrich your lives, guys, culturally. You will watch everything else fall away, because it's like, I don't have to worry about the shit metal. I'm just going to concentrate on the good metal. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, that's the point. I loved you, because like that 4% that I like, it's probably going to be different in some way than Steve's 4%,
oh, sure.
which is different than yours, which is kind of the beautiful thing, which is where I think I'm kind of with you, where I kind of, you know, I always told myself I don't ever want to be a gatekeeper, because I'm not smart enough to do that. But at times you kind of,
neither are they. They're just cocky. But go ahead.
You know, the thing is that at times you do kind of want those people to tell you no, just so you can figure out if there's a reason behind it, or why it is no, or why it isn't. But I think that's the thing too that I do miss, is that the people that are telling me no aren't giving me the reasons. They're playing critic, like Steve said. They read a Pitchfork article, and now they have all this nomenclature, and then they get their soapbox, and people get a following. Where, you know, with us, it's always been kind of, here's why we like it, and we'll talk it out and explain it. And I think that's kind of the thing that slowly becomes the lost art. You know, again, not to harp back on the old point, but realizing what percentage of the thing you like is shared, and also just being completely fine with liking something that isn't, you know, it's part of the other 96% that is quote unquote bad. You know, I love
that
bad things that are bad, because they're enjoyable. The movie we're doing next week is a terrible movie by all accounts. It's a Microwave Massacre. It's garbage. Steve does not want to do this, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. And I think that's the thing that I kind of feel with our generation, now to become that guy, but I think that they're so intent on being part of what is considered quote unquote good. They're not
Right.
allowing themselves to have the fun with the bad, because the fun's half is the best part. I don't need to watch, 900 A24 films and smoke a pipe and be like, haha, of course Hereditary is a modern day Exorcist with familiar undertones and spiritual abuse. It's genius. No, I want to talk about farts and blood sometime, you know?
Sure. Oh yeah, no, of course you do. And yeah, I mean, let's be clear. I can't speak for the dear departed Ted Sturgeon, but I would imagine he was, when he said the 10% he's talking about, I think encompasses what you're talking about. It's like good is not necessarily intellectually defensible. Intellectually defensible is not automatically good. It's like, because again, it's an academic assumption that that the serious is always better than what they would call the trivial. But the trivial can be, trying to think of examples in film. Well, you know, comedy, I guess, would
Right.
be, you know, everybody now, thank God, I mean, I've loved him for decades. Everybody recognizes Buster Keaton is not only a great physical acrobat, he's a cinematic genius. He's a brilliant director. But, and people liked him in the, you know, obviously his movies were hits, but there would be people, I'm sure, maybe Buster's a bad example because so many people did like him, but like in literature, this sort of, the assumption that seriousness equals profundity and lightness is shallow is fundamentally flawed, right? Because then Philip Roth is automatically profound, and P.G. Wodehouse is automatically trivial. But P.G. Wodehouse is only trivial if you think joy is trivial.
Right.
And so the creation of joy in, you know, very light, very simple, souffle-like comic, but joy is joy. And Philip, so, you know, they're saying that joy is trivial, but whining about not getting your cock sucked enough is profound, because that's essentially Philip Roth's entire oeuvre, right? You know, just whinging about the lack of blowjobs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe I've only read the 2 books, but you know,
I mean, it is an important issue plaguing our society.
Yeah,
but
and somebody needs to
I'm
deal
a
with
victim,
it.
you know?
No, what do you think is like the genesis of that? Because I mean, there's even like so you know, various, you know, academic readings and stuff of like how it was the inverse for, you know, the Greeks. They regarded comedy as better, you know, higher,
the high
more
art, yeah, sure.
the high art versus, you know, when did this be? What do you think is the genesis of the way that our, I guess, current Western culture kind of
monotheism? I blame everything on monotheism. The rise of the phallic god, Judeo-Christian Islamic. They're miserable. They're miserable. I don't really blame it on monotheism. I just made that up.
Honestly, though,
you sound like a couple of smart guys, so I wanted to use a big word. But actually, I might say,
I don't think that's too far. That might not be too far off.
I
honestly,
actually do think monotheism is responsible for a lot of bad shit that's happened for the last 5,000 years. But also specific, let's bring it a little, let's continue to blame religion because that's always good.
Yes, absolutely.
But let's blame the Puritans.
Okay.
Because at least the Catholics, I'm Christian Catholic, but I'm not a practitioner. But at least they believe in getting drunk and telling jokes. But the Puritans, it's the Puritan tradition. That's what I think elevated, you know, how do we celebrate God? Be miserable.
Yeah.
And I wonder, it's interesting. Yeah, as you say, the Greeks regarded comedy as a higher art, and that of course predates monotheism. It certainly predates Puritanism. And it's interesting, isn't it, that pre-Christian after fantasies of the afterlife in most pre-Christian systems involve a lot more fucking than post-Christian. There's a lot more shagging Pan in the woods in pagan notions of the afterlife. And I'm not suggesting that's all we should do in the afterlife, but I think it should be there as an option. Don't you?
I would prefer it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. People, it's impossible for us to know. We can't go back to a world in which the entire collective consciousness mindset was reset by both Puritan Reformation and before that,
sure,
the triumph of the monotheistic.
I mean,
but it was probably different, I guess. Also, there were a lot more people being slaughtered on the more miserable life actually is. I'm making this up, obviously. I don't know. But in other words, as Pacino says in Dick Tracy, I'm having a thought. When you were routinely being invaded by barbarians from the north, south, east, and west, and your buildings were being laid to waste and your temples were being crushed, you probably did put a lot more intrinsic value into the things that could make you feel briefly better, like song and dance and comedy. So maybe it was maybe civilization itself is to blame for the triumph of seriousness. I don't know.
I agree. I think most post Justinian films were pretty dour.
Caligula really brought it back up for a moment, but it just got washed away.
Well, let me recontextualize that question, because now I think we kind of have an interesting thing happening. At least back when they would make more comedy movies, I don't know why, but it just seems like comedy movies just don't come out anymore. I guess it's relegated to television purely. But even the height of comedy as a film genre, I think a lot of people would say would be like the 80s through the 90s, and they would routinely outpace, and a lot of the quote unquote what you would call a popcorn movie, the dumb action movies, your dumb comedies, they would routinely outpace your quote unquote high art, drama, tragedy porn kind of films.
Oscar bait shit. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Do you think perhaps there's more so like almost a connection where it is still kind of what we were talking about before, that cork sniffy stuff, like, oh well, that comedy stuff's for that's for the hoi polloi. Yeah, they don't get, who cares about them. I can watch this 14-hour movie that makes me depressed as shit, and that means it must be good. That must be the good thing, because
suffering
one would,
for art in a way, but
right? Because
digesting it.
Well, one would think that that like the paradigm would shift if, like, for that huge period, the most, even for long, the most, even now, one would say, like, the Marvel movies and shit. I'm a noted disliker of all of that, but it's like a lowest common denominator, cookie cutter, make them once every quarter and pump them out. Sure. And then they make trillions of dollars. And you would think that somehow eventually that would become, like, maybe noted as, well, this is the art, this is the good thing, because this is what everyone enjoys, not this other stuff. Maybe, do you think it is that kind of like way that it's almost untenable and impenetrable for a lot of people to get into these, like the Oscar bait kind of stuff, and so that kind of gives it that mystique?
The demographics of theater goers, of cinema going, have changed so much. Well, not just the demographics. I mean, the whole, like, I wonder whether numerically the people who enjoy the type of thing both the type of thing we're putting down and the type of thing we're celebrating. Again, I wonder whether the numbers have really changed at root as opposed to the people, and I'll stop bad mouthing them, but the people I've been bad mouthing who like the Oscar bait shit, they are increasingly in many demographic ways, they have no need of the movie theater. The type of movie they like is really a spectacle. It really requires the collective experience of we're all laughing together, we're all screaming together. So they can see the things they like. Well, I mean, let's face it, nearly everything is watched more on home screens now than in theaters. But people who like the Marvel movies are both simply of the age of people. I mean, I was a movie theater kid. I'm a pre-video kid. So I would go to the movies twice a week, 3 times a week, 5 times a week. I was always there. I hardly go now. So that's happened. But if I don't know what, I mean, there's a lot of old nerds who love the Marvel stuff too, but I'm assuming the main demographic for the MCU stuff is 16 to 28, I assume. They'll still go to theaters, so that will give the appearance of utter domination of the entire medium, never mind the genre. But yeah, people are probably still watching the other stuff, aren't they? I mean, I guess people sat through Power of the Fucking Dog. I don't know. I mean,
well, Sam Elliott apparently didn't. Sure.
It's so weird for me. The phrase "the enemy of my enemy is my friend." I said earlier I usually don't badmouth people or films, so I'm going to break my own rule here because I hate Jane Campion's movies. I've always fucking hated them. They're anti-human. They're vile. I'm sure she's a nice lady, but also Sam Elliott's a fucking prick. Because Sam Elliott,
you're really breaking your rule here. You go for two for one.
Yeah, so it's like, so when those two bitch slap each other, it's like my head's exploding. Whose side do I want to be on? Because and the reason, again, I'm sure Sam Elliott is a sweetheart in real life. Who knows? But he was in the John Milius documentary, and he was saying nice things about John Milius. So obviously he has affection for his friend, John Milius. But the way he chose to say it in that ridiculous fucking baritone voice that nobody actually talks like, like country singers pretend to talk. Nobody fucking talks like that. Nobody.
Isn't he? He's from like Sacramento.
I don't know where the fuck he's from, but see that.
No, I know. That's one thing. I looked that up.
It's point because the best bitch slap was he's not a cowboy. He's an actor. So much as I dislike her work, I liked that work.
Yeah.
That was a good little. But anyway, in the Milius movie, Sam, in his ridiculous voice beneath that ridiculous mustache, said, the reason he likes John Milius is John makes movies for men. He doesn't tell stories for women. He doesn't tell stories for pussies. He tells stories for men because he's a man. And I thought, you fucking asshole. What a Jesus Christ. It was like I'd been waiting for a reason to hate you. And now. So that was terrible. When Jane and Sam went to war, it was like, I don't know whose side to be on. This is terrible.
That's when you just take out the popcorn and you kick back and
right.
Yeah. It's like when when a good game or a good boxing match or something comes on, you're like, you know what, I can just respect this. I don't have my team's not playing. I can just
Right.
watch finally.
Yeah, but they were busy bad mouthing each other, and of course, famously, Scorsese and Coppola
Oh yes.
Have aroused the ire of the MCU fans. Probably because, you know, in both cases they overstated a little. But I don't know, you know, I've got nieces and nephews who just love the Marvel movies, and as I said earlier, I love the fact they love those movies, you know, because anything that inspires people to love stuff is great for me.
Yeah.
And the MCU particularly it's an odd one for me because you guys are sort of in the gap. Like you're probably too old to have been swept up in the MCU movies as kids, but too young to have been part of the Marvel generation, which I was. I was like 8 years old when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were changing the face of the comic book world. So I can't help but have a massive residual affection for the Marvelverse those guys created. The movies bear very little relation to it, obviously.
Yes.
But
no, I grew up a total comic nerd. I loved the comics.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah,
Right.
But you know, it wasn't. We didn't get the, you know, golden or even silver age of comics when, you know, I was getting the Rob Liefeld, you know, can't even see a guy draw a foot correctly, kind of like 90s gritty kind of comics. But
there were muscles upon muscles upon muscles for a long time there. In
I forget who it was or what run, but there was like a run for Superman where he had a gun on like the cover of like every issue. It was, yeah, awesome.
Wow.
Because you know, Superman, that's what he needs is a gun. But
yeah, that's well, I'm sure that was part of an ongoing story in which Red Kryptonite had robbed him of his invulnerability. Of course, right? Okay. Well, then. Stop picking on it. It was narratively necessary.
But they actually the thing that's almost more annoying for me actually is a few of the really good story arcs that they ran in Marvel have been turned into like some of these movies, you know, like the Civil War storyline was a huge storyline, and then they make it one, you know, little Captain America movie, and it's, you know, a lot of people say it's so good, and I enjoy them to a degree. I understand, like we were talking about before, the objectivity that's in some of these things. You know, none of these movies are objectively bad. They put too much resource and time. They have 14.
They're objectively overlong. I think we can say that
for sure.
But yeah, they're not objectively bad. That's
right.
True.
And they're so produced, and they have so much resources, and you know, they have 14 different units that are, you know, so you have like no real particular creative direction, so everything is just kind of being done by committee, and so they each kind of come out the same cookie cutter thing. So if you like that, you like that, and it's good every time. I just think that that's part of the problem, is that it's just so fucking anodyne when you like it's so devoid of any sort of, you know, I would say much like you
flavor.
know,
you mean it's flavor, right?
Yeah, there's no flavor. There's nothing there. And you have movies where it's like, well, do you have all these characters? And it's like, when have any of these characters fucking grown at all then? Which I guess is true to the comics, because, you know, every time something happens, they roll it back. But it's like, you're making fucking movies. Like, can something happen? Like,
well, the way this is partly a result of me being older now as well, I'm sure. But I do think it's also on the movies, not just on me. Because I've watched a bunch of them. I certainly haven't seen all of them. The bits I like, and I understand it can also be criticized for this, but I happen to like it. The banter is fine with me. Just cut out all that stupid fucking action, which is like the the last thing you would think you would want.
Right.
But I don't mind the Avengers movie, like the shawarma scenes, obviously
Yeah.
that people talk about. I like it when Cap and Iron Man give each other shit. That's fine. There is better snappy dialogue in other non-Marvel movies, but I like snappy dialogue wherever it shows up. And so most of the Marvel movies I've seen, I would prefer a 40-minute cut of just them hanging out and bantering with each other. That would be much better for me than.
Well, it's again, not to be cyclical with the way we're talking, but it's like the CGI is so fucking distracting in all these action sequences. You can't even tell.
It really
you
is
can't
for
even
me. Again, I
tell.
don't know if that's an age thing. I guess not. If it's
No, you can't even tell what the hell is supposed to be going on. And there's also the thing, and it came out specifically because of how it was kind of bombed, but like for films such as Black Widow, the action's done before principal photography. Like they literally they've mapped everything out, they've done the action scenes. It's a completely different unit. It's written before the script is even finished sometimes, supposedly.
That's probably not the best way to approach making a movie. Right. But that would not appeal to Aristotle's sense of the unities, would it? That would not.
No, and that's the thing. It's like they have these ideas. It's a completely different thing because it's this machine, and what are we going to put it into? And so, if you watch a movie like Black Widow, it's so much more jarring because Black Widow it has some interesting things going on. This kind of like little bit of thing about family that's really more found family kind of thing, because they all have shared trauma and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, and then it's just crazy fucking action. Well, that's that you can't follow, and
that's a perfect example
completely
of
different film.
I when I said it, I was thinking more of the Avengers movies, but Black Widow was, I guess, is the Marvel movie. No, I saw Shang-Chi, so I was going to say Black Widow was the Marvel I saw most recently. But I mean, I love Scarlett Johansson, I love Florence Pugh, and they're both pretty great when the movie allows them to be themselves.
Right.
When the movie allows them to be the great that they can be. But again, it was like, now if we didn't have the pause and the fast forward, if we lived back in 1974, I would leave the fucking room to make a pot of tea for the action sequences. Call me when the girls start talking again. But I still, because I was that Silver Age kid, and one of my favorites was not Lee and Kirby, obviously, are The Crown, but Lee and Ditko's Doctor Strange was one of my very first favorites. And I'm still gullible enough that, I see the trailer for Multiverse of Madness, and it's like, well, I'm hoping, and it's Sam, right?
It's Sam Raimi. Yeah, that's the only
that's
thing
why I'm intrigued by it all of a sudden.
That's the only thing.
Right.
I forced, because we don't cover enough new movies on this podcast,
right?
And I thought it would be fun. Stupidly, I forced Scott to go see Morbius for our last episode.
Oh, I hear all the terrible things. I haven't seen it. Is it?
I finally recovered, so that's nice.
As a storied author such as yourself, you will appreciate this beautiful piece of prose, which is, after Dr. Morbius creates an anticoagulant, he says, "This is lethal to bats, but to humans, it's deadly." And it's not a joke. If it were a joke, that'd be a great joke.
Yeah. Now, do we think that's possibly a failing? Is it Jared that delivers the line?
Yeah,
Jared delivers.
Is it possibly a failing of delivery? Because that, I mean, as you say, if it was a joke, it would be a great one.
Yes.
And so much so it's structured. I could hear Leslie Nielsen saying that in The Naked Gun. It's so obviously a joke, but presumably it was the writer's mistake, not Leto's, because somebody would have gently said, Jared, I think there's another reading of that line.
These are not to badmouth, but I mean I do this all the time, so I don't care. But these
you guys
writers
definitely bring out the worst in me, by the way. A whole bunch of podcasts, and usually I maintain that decorum of I'll swear like a trooper, I'll badmouth my own shit, but I won't pick on other people. And now Sam Elliott's going to have me fucking killed.
We bring out the worst in everyone. Don't feel bad.
Okay,
It happens.
right,
Everybody that interacts with us on here or in public. So.
But the writers of Morbius also wrote Dracula Untold, The Last Witch Hunter, and Gods of Egypt, if you're familiar with any of those films.
I will not be drawn, sir.
So close.
I thought I might be able to do it again, but all right. I respect that. No.
Well, you know what? Well, actually, you know what? They've made a fucking fortune.
Of course.
I was going to say, I hate people who punch. I'm happy to punch up at Sam Elliott, who could both physically beat me to death and and pay for the criminal case and get off. So I'm happy to punch up, but I hate people who punch down. But that's just me being stupid, because whoever those guys are, they've made that ain't punching down. They could buy and sell me. They've made a lot of money. Morbius is it officially an MCU movie, or is it one of those weird?
It's the Sony.
Yeah. It's the
Sony one. Yeah.
Right.
There is an amazing after credits sequence where Michael Keaton's Vulture gets transported from the MCU into the Sony universe. And it just kind of says it that it happens. And there's another after credits. These are mid credit sequences. And then there's another mid credit sequence where Morbius drives a car out to the desert to meet Vulture, and Vulture says, and this is correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think this is verbatim. Vulture says,
he was asleep by that point. You think he was watching the mid-credit stuff? Come on.
Oh, I stayed for all of it, and there was not an amount of alcohol or drugs that could have made me enjoy that. But that's beside the point.
But the Vulture says, there's something going on here, and I think it has to do with Spider-Man. And then Morbius responds, intriguing. And then the movie, and then it ends. Now, meanwhile, keep in mind, I'm sure that's literally like the first mention of Spider-Man in the Sony universe. They never show Spider-Man. They never say that Spider-Man's there.
So we're just meant to carry any prior knowledge we might have from the comics.
Yeah, we're to assume
there's an existing relationship.
Like the universes are becoming self-aware of each other in like the cinematic sense of the meaning, and it's kind of freaking me out a little bit.
Which I kind of enjoyed Venom. I had no intention of seeing it, and then I went to get a tattoo, and my tattoo artist was really into it, and he forced me to watch. He put Venom on the big screen while he tattooed me. 7%
discount if you go watch it, right?
Yeah, he like forced me to watch Venom with him while he tattooed me. So and I actually quite enjoyed it, but the thing that still bothers me, and sometimes I wake up thinking about it, is that this is a universe without Spider-Man. Why the fuck?
Why the fuck? Because I haven't seen it.
Well, see, they never mention him. They never show Peter Parker. They have the Daily Bugle and everything. They're the trappings of Spider-Man, but Spider-Man's never mentioned directly. And Venom happens in this universe wholly without Spider-Man.
So it was never Spider-Man was never possessed. The suit never became black, even in like an off-screen pre-credit history.
Correct.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's like waiting for Godot.
So why the fuck?
It's so strange.
Why the fuck does Venom have spider powers then? He shouldn't, like the symbiote shouldn't automatically go to web slinging and whatnot.
Yes, it has that because it echoed the thing that it
was
possessing.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, this is a very nerdy conversation because
This is just for us now. Everybody
They
else
just
is like,
make it
fuck
up.
this.
They just make it up.
I didn't expect to have you for
None of
this
this is
long, so
real.
fuck it. I'm talking about Venom.
Yeah.
Like, I love Tom Hardy though.
Yeah, Tom Hardy. Oh, Dreamboat.
Tom Hardy is great.
Is he actually good in the movie? I mean, I know.
I think he is
like
good.
him
He's
anyway.
pretty funny, honestly.
I think he is.
Yeah,
I think the first
okay.
Venom movie is worth seeing.
Okay.
There is also a very interesting reading that a lot of people do where there's like this. I guess there's a reading that that Brock and the symbiote have some sort of like sexual or romantic relationship, the way that the suit banters back to Brock and beyond the like the brains of like the Venom in the comics and stuff. And so there's become this whole second life to Venom, much in the way that like Babadook became like a gay icon. Now Venom's become like the movie Venom's become.
Oh,
like,
I'm so behind the curve.
yeah.
Rewind. Tell me, what do you mean?
Oh, you didn't know that Babadook was a gay icon?
No.
Yeah, the Babadook is gay now. He may have always been gay.
So
Right.
the film itself.
We've always been at war with Oceania. Eurasia has always been our friend.
I like the Babadook, but the film, as far as I know, didn't have any sort of homosexual undertones in any way or LGBTQIA.
I was too dumb to perceive it if it was there. Yeah, that it didn't strike me that way.
No.
I just thought it was always just about drama.
What specifically had happened in the early days of the Netflix algorithm, for some reason, when they were doing those it was like movies with a strong female lead and whatever.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
For some reason, Babadook got categorized for a long time, and it would come up in the LGBTQIA plus films. It was just a complete mistagging.
Because they thought it sounded like a drag queen name or something.
And next on stage is
Now listen,
Babadook.
Yeah.
No, it was a complete error of the algorithm. And so because of that,
algorithms can't make errors.
and because of that, now Babadook has become that people dress as Babadook at pride parades. They have like different
Okay.
they have different artistic renditions of gay Babadook. So
Okay.
That's so weird though how that
no,
that's
it's cool.
Phenomenon though, like that we're gonna get where like if something is put under the wrong category header, we're going to imply whatever that category is telling us is going to be the truth of what you're watching before you click on it, you know? It's like I always tell people when we did Poltergeist pops up as horror. To me, it's a comedy. It's one of the funniest movies of the 80s, you know? It's making fun of middle-class white Americans in California during the Reagan years. Like it's a hysterical critique. And it's very, Toby Hooper-esque, but like you won't see it pop under comedy on Netflix.
No, you won't.
Well,
horror used to be an almost invisible word because it was a big tent.
Yeah.
And so I would never have blinked at Poltergeist being described as horror because we didn't have to parse it down then to, well, nothing really horrific happens. It's a little scary. Maybe it's a scary movie. Maybe it's a ghost movie. Maybe it's a social satire. It was just, it was a huge umbrella in which, movies of, not that this addresses your specific point, but but it triggered that memory in me that it was like, because I always feel now, people have a very narrow definition of horror now. And for the most part, it excludes most of what I do, which is very awkward. And I always feel like I have to write a note of apology to the Hellraiser fans because I write, because I would like the fans to cross over. I would like them to buy some of my books, but I got to write them a note of apology and say, what I actually write are quirky little ghost stories, and nobody gets skinned alive for the most part, and so sorry, but it really was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It was just a catch-all phrase, and you kind of knew by association what the subgenre or the niche flavor of a certain thing was. You knew that Jack Ketchum was going to be different to Stephen King. You knew that Richard Lehman was going to be different to Peter Straub. So I'm only making literature comparisons. I'm trying to think the movie ones, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like, I understand you were not implying this at all, Scott, but the great English, also Liverpool actually, English horror writer Ramsey Campbell has always unapologetically said, I write horror. And when pressed, he says, because it allows me to write anything I want. So he still certainly regards it as a big tent, and also Ramsey, who has been a friend for 40 years, so I don't think he would be offended if I point out the possibility that he would be quite ready to take umbrage. Oh, well, why shouldn't it be a social satire? Horror can do that, you know. Well, it is a comedy. Of course it's a comedy. I've written comedies. And he'd sort of be right. You know, it's like you can still call Poltergeist a horror movie. But yeah, because of this over-categorization within Netflix or all the delivery systems, it is weird. Everything does get narrowed down to, well, it's this. And if it turns out not to be quite this, we all get bent out of shape. And that isn't what I thought I was getting. So
I think that's like overall kind of an interesting point, because I kind of always got somewhat aggravated when something was described as like a horror comedy, like, you know, like a Shaun of the Dead or like an Evil Dead 2 or something, where it's like, yeah,
right.
there's comedy elements, but it's like there's comedy elements in like every horror movie except for like the most like, it's necessary, it's, you know, having moments of at least levity are necessary in order to, you have that off valve that then makes the, if you're talking about a real, like, this is, we're making something scary, you got to have that
Right.
that moment that everything kind of returns to stasis so you can build up again, because it's all peaks and valleys.
Sure.
Right. And so it's like there's always got to be something in these movies, and to be like,
I mean, I'd agree with you. If the label is used consciously or on to steer people away from something they might like, or to suggest it is less than the thing they like, because it's a tough call with something like Shaun of the Dead, isn't it? Because it is clearly more consciously comic in most of its running time, but you know, when he stages the horror, it's pretty fucking horrifying, it's pretty scary. So yeah, so I agree with you that it's like, I don't know, I guess all labels are probably well-intentioned. You know, again, has the algorithm attained sentience? Have the labels become self-aware? So that they're neither well-intentioned nor ill-intentioned, but it's yeah, I mean, that's a tough call. I don't know what, because if you just say Shaun of the Dead is a horror movie, that's sort of underselling its palette, isn't it? It's like this has a very wide range of, you know, it's like it's a smorgasbord. It's a horror smorgasbord. It's got scary bits, funny bits.
Well, I think that's just like a pitfall. I think that there's kind of like an maybe a purposeful, or at the worst, but, or, you know, incidental at the least, kind of malice, I think, in calling something a horror comedy, because now you're valuing it. It was like, yeah, well, it's a horror, but it doesn't, it's not taking all that bullshit seriously, and so now it's okay. Now it's palatable.
No, yeah, if that's the implication, fuck them, sure.
I think that's kind of like the inherent kind of implication that comes with it for I think most people, because I do think there is this kind of, you know, through line, like we've talked about, where people kind of inherently tend to shy away.
Right.
From
I mean,
horror.
Clearly, the intent of did Simon Pegg? I mean, I know Edgar Wright directed, obviously. Simon Pegg and his mate wrote it.
I believe so. I believe
Is-
it's him
Yeah,
and
I
Nick
think
Frost.
him and Nick
trilogy-
Frost had
It's him and Nick
something.
Frost. I think.
Yeah,
Him and
they
Nick
worked
Frost.
on.
Okay. No, it
he
was
in a
it was
TV show before that.
Yeah, they did Space, but no, Shaun of
Yeah.
the Dead was. I'm seeing it was Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright wrote it.
Oh, okay.
So,
So-
no
so-
Frost on that one. I think
But
Frost did
Nick
Hot
Frost
Fuzz.
is involved and in it.
Yes.
Anyway, that troika, those guys,
Mhm.
clearly, I think the difference, what's bothering you is, if we go back to something like Love at First Bite, which was probably you guys have never even bothered to see it. It was a not great Dracula spoof. And the difference between that and let's for a second accept a horror comedy designation
Sure.
for Shaun of the Dead. The difference is that Love at First Bite is sneering at horror, thinks it's superior to horror, thinks the tropes of a vampire movie can only be fuel for comedy because we sophisticated people can only laugh at it. Obviously, Shaun of the Dead and those guys, Edgar, Simon, and Nick, like I know him, I feel obliged to use these first name terms. I've never met him. But
They're English, so you must
they
be
are
friends.
Yeah, you know all of them.
Yeah, we all live in one big clubhouse.
It's the Shire. I mean,
yeah, right. Yeah. But clearly they are not sneering at the genre. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like that.
Okay.
That's the big difference. The comedy horror, if that implies, oh yes, it's for us sophisticated people who only sneer at horror, then yeah, fuck them. But clearly those guys are making a movie that they want to elicit genuine laughter with. You know, in other words, they're not sneering at comedy either. So it's a tough call. Like, you'd have to ask them, I guess. Like, say,
well, if you got any connections,
fuck
Yeah,
are
I'm
you
about to say.
doing?
I know you said you didn't know him, wink, wink, but if you want to send him over,
Well, I'll send word. I think they're on the 17th floor. Let me. Yeah. We must have somebody in common. I bet Gaiman knows him, right? Doesn't he
maybe.
know everybody?
I
I
feel
think
like
at this
everybody
point-
knows Neil. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
at
I've
this
seen
point.
him speak live at this point. Yeah.
Then I'll get word to them and I'll let you know what their preferred. I don't know, but that would be interesting, you know, to say, what do you call it? What do you call these movies you make? And if those little punks say, "Oh, I just call them films," then I'm going to hit them. You know?
Well, make sure that they'll have that threat too once we get them on.
Yeah, right. Do you know, this is probably music that you guys didn't like, but did you see Edgar Wright's documentary on Sparks, the Sparks brothers?
No, but I heard it is
No.
really good. I've been meaning
It's
to. I
fucking
just haven't.
terrific. Yeah, it's great. It's great. I mean, I haven't followed, you know, Sparks had their first big hit in 1974, way before you guys were born. I think literally before Edgar Wright was born. I think he was born 2 years later, but they had this one big hit. This town ain't big enough for the both of us. And then they've had this non-stop, like now 50-year career. They just wouldn't give up. They never really broke them. That's a lie. They had a couple of disco hits, oddly enough. But whether you liked them or not in 1974, it's just an amazing story of they just kept going, man. It was like, and they're weird, the Mail brothers, Ron and Russell. It's quoted in the movie, but apparently it was literally true, because the two brothers, and Russell had a mane of curly hair, and Ron looked different. And the line that will reveal how he looked was apparently they were on Top of the Pops, and John Lennon, who was not yet dead, that's how long ago it was, phoned Ringo Starr and said, "You've got to put Top of the Pops on. Mark Bolan's singing with fucking Hitler." Because Ron Mayall's look. Ron was the first guy to brave the toothbrush mustache after World War II. Yeah, it was like, because, you know, as we know, Charlie Chaplin had it. Lots of people had that mustache, but that Hitler, he fucking ruined it, man. That was it was no longer a mustache of choice for most people. But Ron Mayle bravely in 1974 sat there completely expressionless at his keyboard with his slick back hair and his little Hitler mustache, while his very pretty brother in sort of glam rock drag danced around and sang, and fucking a Mark Bolan singing with fucking Hitler. But that's hardly the highlight of the movie, that's one time. But it's a terrific. If you like music documentaries,
Yeah,
I really recommend it.
But it's been on my watch list. I've heard it's great. So
it is great. Let me ask you again, then, given that we do it, all music documentaries are good to me. Like, even if I can't stand the band, it's like, it's weird. There's something just great about watching, especially bands that have had volatile histories and hate each other. There's obviously I prefer the ones that are about bands I love, but even bands I don't like, it's like, it's intrinsically interesting to watch.
I've found a couple bands like that recently. I plug them sometimes on here and on Twitter. I love the podcast No Dogs in Space, and they do this exploratory. The first season was all about punk, and I'm like, fuck, I love the Misfits, I love the Damned, and then you hear these stories and you see, the story of the band is as exciting and as interesting as the music. Right. And that's how I found, I'm a slut for documentaries. You pop up something like, do you want to learn it? I'm like, hell yeah. I love that. And I think that's kind of the interesting, at least about that medium, is that, for me that, really likes to know stuff. It kind of, if you weren't a fan of something, you might become a fan of it just because you're seeing, all the strings and all the meat and the mess that, goes into making it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you hear the human stories as well, because I always, even though I think they're a couple of years younger than me, but they're essentially my generation. I never really liked Def Leppard because they seemed like, third generation metal, kind of pop metal. But I knew they were Bowie fans like I was. And also I also knew they were northern working class kids like I was. And when they kept their drummer, despite him losing his fucking arm in a car crash, I just loved them. And it's like you get those sort of stories in documentaries, and it's like, well, now I love Def Leppard because their friend lost his arm. Now, you're musicians, so I mean, a one-arm
arms is one of the most important limbs for a drummer.
Yeah, I've got two of them, exactly. And I still can't use them right.
Of the four, losing a leg, it's okay because you can alternate between the kick and the hi-hat. But instead of saying, Jesus, Rick, we're so sorry, hope you don't mind, but we've called Ringo. No, they worked it out. And it was like, my God, what a great fucking story. So, not that I saw that in a documentary, I just remember that in real time, but presumably other bands I hate could also have beautiful, heartwarming human interest stories in their documentaries.
On the other hand, there's always Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, which takes a band that you hate that makes you hate them even more.
Yeah,
which is also pretty fun. It's just long. That one's long.
Yeah,
just watching four grown men in therapy, you think it would be somewhat exciting, and it's
awesome. I love it.
Yeah. I actually have not. I assumed I would end up liking the movie, and I'm not a Metallica fan. But my assumption actually was that if I watched it, I would probably like them a little more. But I guess you found the exception to the rule. Oh, okay.
It's like I always liked Lou Reed, and then he did an album with them called Lulu, and I started to get question my love for the Velvet Underground after listening to two songs off of that. Yeah. So
now, you explained something to me that I didn't know because I saw a YouTube clip. I guess it was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, so it shouldn't have been unusual because they often put strange bedfellows together on that. But I saw them playing Sweet Jane with Lou, and I
Yeah.
thought, how come? But I did not
That's
know that
why.
they made a whole album together.
A
They
whole
made
album.
a whole ass album.
I think it was
And
actually, if I, it could, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think it's actually the last album that Lou
That
Reed
Lou
made.
made?
I
Yeah.
think it's the last one that he actively wrote new material for. There may have been some subsequent releases before.
But what you're
that,
hoping to imply is that they killed him, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
they
that's what you-
absolutely. I will say this right now on air, and to anybody listening, I 100% believe that Lars Ulrich did kill Lou Reed. I just
Okay.
put that fact out there.
I am so grateful because now my observation about Sam Elliott is the least offensive observation
Yes.
on the show. So that's great. Thank you.
Oh,
It
you're
was
welcome.
it was his last studio album,
Wow.
2011.
Yeah, Metallica is just a bunch of
And
murderers.
um, and was it obviously, as I say, I saw him doing Sweet Jane, but Lulu was all new material, or it was Metallica covering old classic?
No, there's new material on there, and
Yeah, all lyrics written by Lou Reed, all music is composed by Reed and Metallica. So that's all new songs, if I recall correctly.
That does not sound
but
promising.
there's a difference. Like, you hear, "Hey, babe, take a walk on the wild side," and then you hear, James Hetfield, who's just like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." It does not for good bedfellows make at all, and maybe when we're done with this, you'll go torture yourself and listen to a couple tracks, because it's an experience you'll never ever get back. That's for sure.
Well,
it reached number 4 on the Croatian album chart, so I don't know how you haven't heard of it.
Let people out of this.
Is it Lulu like the Wedekind opera and the Glaswegian pop singer L-U-L-U, or is it
Yes.
Lou?
Yeah.
Lou. Okay.
No, L-U-L-U, yes.
It's not a riff on Lou's name.
No.
It may subtly be that way, but
yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that was Metallica's pet name for him. Who knows?
Oh God.
That's making me physically ill, the idea of that.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, because I'm not a metalhead, I don't know, who's in favor, who isn't in favor, who people like and who they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
I objectively see that Metallica can play their instruments. So this is only subjectively do I say I don't like them. But I will say this, and about metal bands in general, even though it tends to be something very simple with me. It's like they flatten the fourth and the third. All the riffs are blues based rather than melodic based, and that just doesn't press my buttons as much. But they can punch it. All metal, but if you can't punch it, you shouldn't be playing that genre at all. And I got to admit, as it went on, I did not like the version of Sweet Jane, but it's one of the all-time great riffs that Lou wrote. And the initial 90 seconds of Metallica just playing that Sweet Jane riff was pretty powerful, because it was like, this is a big, punchy, hard metal band playing that riff and it was it gave me no impression that I deserve to give Metallica another listen. It was specifically because it was a Sweet Jane riff. It was like, well, that's a great riff, and you can't deny they're playing it with some fucking oomph,
Yeah.
And then it wasn't a great version of the song as it went on, but there was
showmanship can really rough out the wrinkles sometimes on certain things until you start thinking about what's happening, and then it's just horrifying.
Well, James Hetfield, unless he's burning himself on stage, he's not very much of a showman either. So
oh God, now we're punching down. We're punching up. I don't know which way we're punching at this point.
James Hetfield, yeah, that's definitely punching up.
No, again, forgive my ignorance of metal politics. Are you guys unusual in metal world in not liking Metallica, or are they a very divisive...
I'm just unusual to begin with.
it's yeah, that's difficult. So the metal is so subdivided now. With
Right.
there's even more subgenres in metal, I think,
Oh,
than
yeah.
I would say than any other genre right now, and they're all have these stupid little internecine conflicts that are
Right.
wholly stupid.
Some of them even have
But
dress codes too. When you get down to like the legitimate like groupings of the people, it's
yeah,
weird.
but
Well,
Metallica is always considered to be in the big four of thrash metal. So if you like
right.
thrash, you're supposed to like them. If you like metal in general, you're supposed to like them. But then there's also like, what, you only like Metallica because you know they were popular. So there's also like, if you have to like and respect Metallica, but Metallica can't be your favorite band because that means you're not a good enough metal fan. That you haven't
Right.
gone deeper than Metallica. It's so dumb.
It's like there's a
Okay.
discouragement with the metal community to not go down rabbit holes to discover the music that you're supposed to find if you do like something
Right.
else. So it's like, oh, you like Metallica, well, you can't like this, and then you go explore it and you enjoy it, and then
And you
you
find that you
yeah, and
do,
then
yeah.
yeah, it's a big circle jerk basically. But at the end of the
What
day,
is at this point? I'm sure this is becoming officially boring. So
This is
I
awesome.
assume
no,
No,
we're
this is
having a good
awesome.
time.
I
I feel
assume you're
bad for
going to
everybody
edit
else,
most of
but
this out for your audience because I'm just asking you questions now because I'm
No, this is
interested.
yeah,
cool.
now you interview us. Yeah, this is
Yeah,
fun.
well, what I want to know, just as a guy who literally is old enough to have seen the birth of heavy metal,
Mhm.
I guess I was Led Zeppelin, first Led Zeppelin album. I know that they are not.
69.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
They're no longer recognized as metal, and
Yeah.
clearly they're not metal, but they were called that
Right.
for a long time. From about 69 to 73, Sabbath, Purple, Zeppelin. It was again, it was a sort of big tent. The
Right.
term heavy metal was loosely used to mean hard rock, whatever it was that those guys were busy inventing between them. And then obviously by the later 70s, you got literally the self-consciously named the new wave of
Yes.
heavy metal. But to people, to the metalheads these days, forgetting the internecine conflicts and the subdivisions, where does it is Sabbath metal? Do they recognize Black Sabbath as a heavy metal
For
band?
sure,
Or
yeah, I would say for sure it
So-
is. Yeah.
So this is where I come in.
Okay.
This is I like Sabbath. I'm not a huge Sabbath fan. Sabbath is considered specifically the progenitors of the subgenre doom metal.
Oh well, because of Ozzy's lyrics, if nothing else.
Right. And
Yeah.
and so that's categorized by being compared to like the thrash and stuff, which cuts out a lot of some of the low end. It's very to get into the really hyper bullshit, a lot of it is like using more the high, super high gain American amps instead of like a Marshall or whatever,
Right, sure.
or a Laney or whatever. And so the doom side is categorized by being more of that lower tempo, not going into the crazy
Right.
speed riffs, having that more of a organic sound, generally shying away from the growled vocals and keeping the more of a melodic and clean vocal and stuff. So that's kind of the genre that I like the most in metal.
Yeah.
I've been in a couple doom metal bands and stuff, like that's been
Right.
my thing. So yes, Sabbath is still considered metal, and they're specifically, if not just being referred to as just blanket heavy metal, because now
Right.
heavy metal is kind of referred to, that's like those like proto bands they're all like heavy metal. That's heavy metal now. And then in a sub level, Black Sabbath is like the doom band.
Right. Okay, sure.
And then even to get it even more complicated, because they have songs like Sweet Leaf, which is clearly about smoking the marijuana. You
Right.
get the
What?
other. I know, shocking.
Yes, you get the doom subgenre of stoner metal,
stoner metal, and then
which is
stoner
a little
metal
more
could be,
psychedelic,
yeah,
sounding, but still keeping that riff-based, slower tempo generally.
Sure.
But then it's got more of like a kind of like
Oh, that's
Sabbath, but like a
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
fanciful lyric content that's like really plays off of like fantasy novels and stuff. You see a lot of stoner metal that talks about Lord of the Rings and
Oh,
Conan the
Wizards.
Barbarian
sure.
and
But
wizards and orbs and stuff, which is the stuff I like because I am also a stoner. So
Right.
you know,
I just
well,
like
yeah, because
orbs.
you had that whole, Michael Moorcock, the great science fiction writer, was
I love
pals
it.
with Lemmy,
Yes. Yeah.
and Moorcock wrote lyrics for Hawkwind, I think, and they had this
Yes.
spin-off band called the Hawk Lords based on some of Moorcock's fantasy novels. So I guess there's always been that crossover.
Yeah.
all metalheads are deep down, whether they want to admit it or not, complete geeks. And
Oh, well,
I would
sure, because
rather
you've only
any
got to look at
songs
the
and
fonts they choose for their album titles.
Oh yeah,
It's like
Yes.
it's like science fiction book cover
Yes.
horror. It's sharp letters with daggers that glint. Yeah, sure. But Hawkwind wouldn't be considered metal.
No,
No,
they were
I
like,
would
But
say-
Motorhead would.
yeah,
oh, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everybody loves Lemmy, man.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Well, do you guys? I mean,
Oh yeah, I love
Oh,
Lemmy.
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't a trick. I wasn't going to be mad if you didn't. It's just, it's
Oh,
like
shit,
even
what's the right
people,
answer?
even people who just like me genuinely have no taste for metal. Everybody loves Lemmy. It's like
He's up there with like Rob Halford or Judas Priest to me, where he just always was himself and just
always
doesn't
was
look like
himself.
he could ever do anything wrong to me, because he also just seemed like good, fun dudes, like
Yeah.
especially if the music, and a lot of the music that me and Steve listen to, and I go off the deep end of lots of stuff. A lot of the guys are like really unlikable and
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
opinionated, and it's kind of like you learn stuff, and then listening to an album becomes
Well,
really hard.
That's not to get too into the politics of it, but one of the hardest things about metal is the absolute proliferation within the scene of like various Nazis and right wing like kind of fascist
sure.
bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that
happens
happened to
everywhere.
punk as well, though.
Of course,
Yeah, oh,
of
yeah.
course. But
Skinheads
there's
were never actually racist in the the early days, but then they became
Right.
that. Yeah, it's just
Right.
the evolution of things.
yeah, it's just it becomes so heavily associated with it, and
Yeah.
Nazis just love to co-opt the coolest shit.
Yeah.
Metal and
Right.
Norse mythology and all
Right.
kinds of stuff that's just like sick. Now
Sure.
it's like you might be racist. Yeah, like wearing a pair of Doc Martens with red laces. That just looks cool. It has a nice contrast. Why do they hit the skinheads have to go and take it? Like,
Well, yeah, right. Oh, I thought for a minute you were defending skinheads. I mean, not that they need attacking either. It's just that, again, if you're my age, if you were a 15-year-old long hair in 1971, I mean, I remember getting chased. It's like because skinheads were fucking terrifying.
I'm sure, yeah.
When they first popped up in Liverpool and other working class towns, but they liked good music. Usually played by black people, which was surprising given the racist tendencies of most skinheads. But they loved ska and they loved reggae and Northern Soul. I don't know how much you know about that. It was this. It's weird. They call it Northern Soul because the dance clubs in Northern England popularized a lot of R&B records that hadn't been hits when they were first released. Nobody made Northern Soul or played Northern Soul. It was it helped repopularize a lot of black R&B music, and it was predominantly not so skinheads. A couple of years when they let their hair grow out a quarter of an inch or whatever, where so yeah, that's a whole other program's worth of sociological discussion. The disconnect between racist youth subcults and the music they actually like, which is often made by people they profess to hate. So that's
the absolute most racist kids I grew up with all were just like listening to rap music, like because that was the
you're
thing.
Right. Yeah, it still goes on to right. I hadn't made that connection, but yes, that still happens. Yeah, it's weird. But Scott, you missed an opportunity for the segue there. I innocently brought up Lemmy because he arose naturally in conversation, but Lemmy sings us out of Hellraiser 3.
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up, but I missed the segue. There's 2 Motorheads on the soundtrack, even. Tracks on there.
Right.
That's it. I'm kicking. Even though Scott made this podcast, I'm kicking him off. Peter, you have official standing invitation whenever.
I'm free. Finally, I'm free. Yeah, I mean, this has been a weird. I feel like we interviewed you. We didn't. You always said, "Hey guys, we're doing Hellraiser." We didn't even. Who fucking cares? And now you're gonna start interviewing us. This has been super fun, and it's completely strange. Like pretty much every interview we do, which is always that we're
Scott gets so nervous for them, and I just come in. I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And usually ends up okay.
Yeah,
I don't make too much.
No, but you're the stoner. You see, usually that the het up or depends on drugs of choice. So I would have thought nervous person, speed freak, hang loose stoner, but I'm sure you healthy young men manage to do both, you know.
See, we both have crippling anxiety. Scott, that's why he smokes weed. I just take Ativan.
Right. You're one of the new kids. I'm a Xanax guy myself, but I understand. It's younger and hipper. I get it. At least it's not fucking Valium, man. That's for really old people.
I'm just sad I'm too old and I missed the Quaaludes. I feel like nothing like completely losing all motor function to really calm you down.
Yeah. Drugs. They were big in the 70s. Yeah.
They're still pretty big today.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Oh man, you've done this. We've talked way too long. I
feel
I'm just kind of like shocked almost.
It's been a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I realize I actually do have to wrap it up.
That's fine.
That's fine. You're like an hour.
I was banking on like 40 minutes. I'm like, we can do 40. We got 40.
Yeah, well, feel free to cut this. Be good filmmakers. Cut this thing down to a tight 50, and it's there might be some fun stuff in there. Who knows?
It's gonna be clips of you insulting Sam Elliott on repeat. That's all.
Yeah, just don't make that the promo, okay?
That's going straight to that's going to be our inaugural TikTok. It's just that one part.
At Sam Elliott. See what he said?
Right.
He's not on TikTok. That would be crazy.
That would be funny. All right, Peter. Again,
but
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It.
Oh no, it's been
this has been amazing.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate you.
I think when you originally said it, you said there wasn't. I didn't shave, but I'm glad I washed my face. So you originally it was audio only, right? But you do put them up on YouTube?
Well, we didn't just to segue back to the music. We interviewed a guy from the band Pentagram. He's like the godfather of and he kept requesting. He goes, "This is my favorite interview I've ever done." He messages me, and I talk to him all the time. And I was like, "I'm gonna put this on YouTube for you," because he wanted to show other people. He doesn't want to show people the podcast. He wants to show people the interview.
Right.
But
we had that podcast beyond the paywall anyway.
Yeah.
So.
that was on the Patreon. So I was just like, you know what, we're gonna throw this up on the YouTube just because, a little cross promotion, because their algorithm's different than the Audible, which is different than Spotify's. And so you look great. I mean, we look like schmucks. Steve is just guns out this whole time.
To be honest, I didn't know.
I'm too old to look great anymore. I'm not worried about that.
He's usually shirtless and like a robe with a cigar. It's terrifying. So
I didn't know we were going to be putting it up. So yeah, it's news to us both. So
I gotta have something that in my bag of
only
wonders
because it's and again, I think not so much me, because obviously I'm young and hip, but friends my own age, they can't find fucking podcasts. So it's like, so it's always, I would never have pushed you to do it. But it's just always easier. Like,
well, I promise on Thursday when everything's up, I will link it. I'll link it up and send it to you so you can show your friends.
There is no need to do that unless you're doing it. But yeah, it is surprising how many people say, send me a YouTube link. They just they can't. Maybe they're just people they don't. Where do most people listen to you? stoned at night at home or while they're driving. A lot of people podcast in the car, right?
I guess if
Yeah.
I looked at the
I mean,
time, it would be
consumers, not
different. I would say we get a lot more in the morning and afternoon, but I mean, it's all usually on in terms of platform. I mean, we're
Huh.
Spotify and iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called now. It's like
Sure.
that. So and like we can see the demographic, and it's usually like 25 to 35-year-olds is like the big one.
To
Men
be
over
fair,
women, but
the areas in where we're most popular is like North Central Africa. So I don't know when they're listening to us.
Right.
There's a lot
Well,
of we have a lot
there's
of
always
fans
like
in
that-
Mali
that's,
and Mauritania. So I don't know
Yeah.
what's prompting them to listen to us at all, let alone
Right. I rarely update my blog as you discovered earlier, but I do remember there's that you look at the analytics on that thing and it's like, so for 3 days, 3,000 people in Russia visited my blog.
I think they're trying to hack into it though.
Yeah, right, exactly. It is, yeah, because it's not the normal 14 people in the whole month. It's
they're just trying to see if there's going to
I'm
be
not saying
Pissa
that's
and
the
North
same
Star
with
too.
Central Africa. That might
That's
be hardcore horror movie and metal fans. I don't know. But whenever I get spikes, it's like, oh, look, the KGB's back. They're obviously, they're just, either there's a lot of Wishmaster fans inside the Russian security services,
Well, they
or
have a lot
yeah,
of
they're
wishing.
just doing a blanket sweep of what can we, free Ukraine. There, we said it.
There
We're
we
good.
go. Slava Ukraine.
Alright,
There we go. Now we're
yes.
cool. All right. Dude, Peter, once
Right.
again, thank you so much.
thank you so much.
That's been
Go do
terrific.
your much more important things than talking to us for another time. But again,
It's
we
called
appreciate
cooking
this.
for the wife before she gets mad at me. That's the important
Yeah,
thing I'm
yeah,
doing.
mine's texting me, so I'm aware.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you again.
All right.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much.
Cheers.
Stay in touch, guys. It's been a lot
Oh,
of fun.
absolutely.
Will do.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. We're
Right.
playing this game.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. It's like, is he gonna go first? I have no idea how long we've been doing this for.
This has been 2.5 hours.
Ooh, Lord, we're getting Rogan-esque here, just talking about random shit.
That was
too
awesome.
long.
Though.
No, that was I'm glad that I always send you notes and you're always like, dude, what the fuck? I used nothing I wrote down at all besides the intro and one question, and then I was completely okay with that because pretty much sent you all of this like 20 minutes 25 minutes before I was finished with it, so there was really no effort. We didn't touch a damn thing about Hellraiser 3 really, or any of the movies, but we just had a good fucking time, and I enjoyed this
was
a lot
awesome.
more than talking straight horror facts from
We
time to time.
we need to do more interviews, man.
Well, I got that all set up. I got more coming. I mean, I'm doing a lot myself for the Patreon, which you all should be, signing up for at Groovy Lil Pod. I'm not going to do a whole lot less because this has already been long. You know where to follow the show at Groovy Little Pod. Your Twitter, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, the Patreon. Next week, we're going to go super low brow with Microwave Massacre. Mostly because I just want to torture Steve, like I said earlier in the episode. Jenna is intrigued by it, so she's going to be really mad with me. And then we're ending the month with the next Robert Eggers film, which is The Northman, which I'm super stoked for. I almost assuredly say it's going to be great.
Yes.
We'll be doing that episode with another podcast, Horrify My Friends. Travis, their lead host, is going to be jumping on and joining with us. He's very stoked to see that movie. So it's going to be a couple different people this month, from Peter Atkins to No Jenna to some other people. And we're going to try to do that a little bit more often too. So we got a lot of stuff coming. The whole theme for this month was just some way to pull it all together so we can go back to a theme next month more seriously. So, whatever, you guys seem to like it. Follow me at the Ghoul Daddy on the internet, Twitter mostly. You all know that. Steve is at the Rude Speaker, and I'm gonna go smoke my cigar that I've been waiting like an hour to smoke. So cheers, buddies. We'll see you later.
Later.